Good evening. I'd like to welcome everybody to the May 17th meeting of the St. Mary's County Planning Commission. Our meeting is being recorded for the public record. Any comments made by anyone present must be recorded as part of the record. That also goes for anybody testifying either over the phone or internet. Therefore, if you have anything to say, you must come up to one of the microphones provided, or when given testimony online or on your telephone, give us your name followed by your statement. Your comments cannot be recorded and placed in the record unless they are done in this fashion. You are to direct your statements, questions, and responses to the board only, and we will direct them to the appropriate person for an answer. Please keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. Anyone testifying or asking questions during our public hearings will be required to take an oath, and we thank you for your cooperation. On our agenda this evening, we only have one item for a public meeting. That would be for concept site plan number 20-132-00011 for Breton Bay Brewery. The owners is David and Jada Stuckert. And they are requesting a review of a concept site plan for a 3,360 square foot farm brewery. After that, we'll have any other developments that have come up, followed by adjournment. At this time, I'll let the board members that are all sitting here tonight, plus one, introduce themselves at this time.
Kim Summers.
Patty Robrack.
Howard Thompson.
Joe Van Kirk.
Merle Evans.
Joe Vazikis.
And we also have Mr. Joe St. Clair here as an alternate taking our 7th seat. From Land Use and Growth Management, we have our director, Mr. Bill Hunt. Our planner.
Present and accountable.
Yes, thank you. Forgot about that delay. The Director of Land Use and Growth Management, Mr. Bill Hunt. Our planner is Brandy Glenn. Our planner 3 is Courtney Jenkins. And our administrative coordinator is Kathy Garcia. Our video media producer is Amy Carter. From the County Attorney's Office, we have Mr. David Weiskopf, County Attorney, and Neil Murphy, our Deputy County Attorney. Just seeing who else we have. We do have the applicant here. Also, their representative, Chris Longmore from Dugan, McKissick, and Longmore, and Mr. Wayne Hunt from Little Silence Rest. I believe that's everybody in the room. Okay. Since we have announced the case, we'll start right in on the evening. At this time, I'll ask anybody in this room that's going to be testifying. And let's see, Mr. Hunt, Mr. and Mrs. Stuckert, and then I'll ask anybody else during public testimony. I'll swear them in at one at a time. But if y'all could or would raise your right hand at this time, and I'll give you the oath. Do you declare and affirm under the penalty of perjury that testimony, responses, and statements you may give will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth? Okay, thank you. Oh, good to see you. Good to see you, Mr. Hunt and Mr. and Mrs. Stuckert. Everybody's here. Yeah. Okay, we'll go ahead and start it off with staff. Randy, you want to go ahead?
And everybody can see that?
Yes.
Okay.
Can everybody see that out in
Yes.
computer world?
Yes, yeah, we can see it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chris.
Perfect.
All clear.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Okay. This case was continued from the February 22nd, 2021 meeting. Agenda item 1 is concept site plan 20-132-00011 Breton Bay Brewing. The concept site plan seeks approval for a 3,360 square foot farm brewery. The site is located at 40140 Wathen Road in Leonardtown. The land use is rural preservation. The zoning is Rural Preservation District. Use 12C Farm Brewery, a facility operated under a Class 8 farm brewery license may include an area or separate facilities for product sampling, incidental and administrative office functions, incidental retail sales of beer and related promotional items, promotional events held pursuant to a permit from the comptroller, and kitchen facilities for preparing and serving food pursuant to the license. The rural preservation districts are intended to foster agricultural, forestry, and mineral resource extraction and aquaculture uses and protect the land base necessary to support these activities. Low-density residential development in this type of district is permitted subject to performance standards that maintain the rural character of the district in recognition of the fact that a full range of public facilities is not provided or planned. The general intent of the district is to encourage farming without undue burden on the landowner. The public notice for the Planning Commission public hearing was published in the Enterprise on February 5th and February 12th, 2021. The property has been posted in accordance with CZO requirements, Section 21.3.3. Certified mail receipts have been received and have been entered into the record of this public hearing as Exhibit 1. The agenda was posted on the website on May 11th, 2021. The concept site plan was reviewed at the TEC meeting held on July 22nd, 2020. Farm brewery is a permitted use in the RPD. Site plan approval is required. For all non-residential and multifamily residential projects that require major site plan approval, a concept site plan shall first be approved by the Planning Commission before the major site plan may be processed for approval by the Planning Director. This is a public hearing which enables all who wish to provide information to the Planning Commission. In order to approve the concept site plan, the Planning Commission shall make the findings that the proposed development is consistent with the comprehensive plan and applicable functional plans, may be served by adequate public facilities as required by Section 70.2.2, will promote the health, safety, and welfare of the general public, adequately developed recreational and other community amenities are provided in accordance with the comprehensive plan and the comprehensive zoning ordinance, is consistent with Chapter 62 design objectives. There's one outstanding issue. If the concept site plan is approved, then the applicant will need to seek a variance to deviate from the 15-foot type A buffer where it cannot be provided per the ordinance. This concludes the staff report and is entered into the record of this public hearing as Exhibit 2. Representing the applicant is Chris Longmore with Dugan McKissick and Longmore, and Wayne Hunt with LSR. Do you have any questions for me?
Does anybody have any questions of staff at this time?
No questions.
Brandy, during your presentation, just following you along, correct me if I'm wrong, I could have been writing something at the same time, but I don't, did you go over the purpose of the RPD page? That would have been page 8.
Did I go over the purpose of the RPD? I did.
Okay, I'm just making sure I was writing and doing this and doing that. Seemed like to me I missed a page.
You want me to go over it again?
No, I'll pay more attention next time. I've read it already today, but I just wanted to make sure that everybody else had heard it. I apologize.
Randy, one quick question. On the first page of your presentation, I think it said 3 acres, and this says 2.07. Is it 3 or?
It's 3 acres. There's two parcels. There's the
Okay.
lot, and then there's a parcel A.
Okay,
So there's 2 parcels that make the whole site up.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Any other questions of staff?
Actually, to follow up on that, so the 2 parcels, are they connected in any legal sense? Or, past the this hearing, is the applicant able to separate the 2 properties?
Do you mean like subdivide them?
Yes.
No, the parcel A, the smaller piece, is actually density for the larger subdivision.
Okay.
It can't be further developed as in residential with another dwelling or anything like that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions of staff? Okay. Before the applicant starts, I do want to say that I did go out to this site. I looked on Google Earth, and I looked at the county GIS, and the question of basically driveway type of thing I wanted to see, I needed to see it myself. So I will say that I went out to the site. I didn't discuss the case with the applicant or anything, but I did go out to the end, to where their property is, and then came back out. I just wanted to make that known.
And, Mr. Chairman, I did the very same thing for the very same reasons. I think that, again, sometimes it's not necessary to do that, but in this instance, I thought it was. And again, nothing discussed that's not in this information that we have really before us. So just let everybody know. Thank you.
And Chairman Thompson, I also visited the property from the public right-of-way and turned around very difficultly in the very small right-of-way to see that I had no interactions with the any people.
Okay. Mr. Weiskopf?
Thank you.
Are we being,
As was discussed last week, it is discouraged. I mean, it's not a flat no. But, the case that Mr. Murphy was talking about when he was talking about how the Court of Appeals had, allowed it, that was a full board going, not just one individually, but the full, so that way all members of the board saw it. Because now I think what happens is you don't just say, I went there. You now have to put on the record what you saw, because you could possibly base your decision based on something that you saw out there that is not on the record in front of you. And as everybody knows, going back to June 15th of 1215, when, who was it? The old rebel barons, tracked down King John of England and forced him to sign the Magna Carta. Chapter 39 of that allowed us to, brought up the thing of due process, right? Because what we want to, and due process at its most basic level is opportunity and notice to be heard, right? And due process at its most basic level, more basic than that, is fairness. Right, and that's what we're really getting at, is fairness. And I'm not suggesting that anybody here wouldn't be fair, but the applicants have a right to have have the decision that you all make based on what is on the record. So what you guys have gone out there and seen is not part of the record. So number one, if Mr. Longmore so chose, I think he has a right to cross-examine you and ask you questions about it if he so chose to do that. But number two, I think you have to put on the record, what time did you go out there? When did you go out there? What did you see when you were there? Did you pass a car when you were going there? If you think the driveway is narrow, did you get out and, measure it with a tape? Or you just, and on and on and on. But we've got plenty of time, and I think you guys have to put on the record what you saw.
we can do one other thing if you want. We can continue this, and I can ask the other board members that didn't go out there to go out there.
But then so now all of a sudden we've got 7 different trips.
Well,
maybe somebody went out there at 5 o'clock, maybe somebody went out there at 7 o'clock. I mean, the more attenuated it gets, the more unfair it possibly gets. And again, not that I think I understand when we were discussing it, the other week, it is a very fine line, right? Because if we're discussing, as we, said, the 7-Eleven on Route 5, well, everybody's passed that a million times. You can close your eyes and imagine there. Everybody's passed it when the school buses are pulling out. You can close your eyes and imagine that. So I get, on one hand, you guys say, well, what's the big deal if we just go out there and see it in person? I mean, you said you looked at it on Google Maps. Did you look at it on the 1938 Google map? Did you look at it on the 58, the 78, the 95, the 97, 2020? Was it spring? Was it fall?
I went to
Were there
Google.
trees out there? Were there not trees out there? I mean, it just,
All right, well, give me a chance and I'll answer a couple.
oh, certainly. But I just think, and maybe it doesn't matter to Mr. Longmore at all. I mean, I'm not trying to, and again, I'm not trying to, press his case at all. But I think he would say that,
Well, the reason I went out there, I'll start and I'll ask the other board members, the reason I went out there is when I went to Google Earth, I didn't look up what date it was on. I know just enough to go to Google and find a map on it. And on the county GIS, I went on there. I saw exactly what was on the pictures that the applicant sent. I saw a house and I saw a building. My reasoning for going out there was twofold. The letters that we got in our packets, most of them had to do with the driveway and things like that. I've never been on Wathen Road in my life. I don't say that very often. I've been around the county a couple times. Never been on Wathen Road. Don't know why they didn't invite me. So I went out to Wathen Road and I drove that driveway and I went out and they were on their deck. I said, hello.
right.
I'm from the Planning Commission. I just need to see. Did my thing, got back in the car and went out. I just wanted to see. It's a long driveway,
Sure.
and that's what, that was what made me go to that site. I wanted to see.
Right.
Because I could tell something was changing. I mean, what it is half of it's blacktop and half of it's gravel. And so it just didn't look right. So that's.
So I have a question for you, Dave.
Sure.
So given what you just said, went back 2 weeks ago, are you suggesting that we are required to make decisions based solely on the information that's provided to us in this packet from staff?
I think the answer to that is you're supposed to base it on the evidence that's introduced to you, whether it's from staff, whether it's from the applicant.
So let me go a little further. And I had this conversation with Mr. Murphy.
That's fine.
I mean, so about due diligence again. I went online. And downloaded the licenses that are available, from the state of Maryland, and I have them here.
Okay.
I didn't reach out to staff to do that. I wasn't provided that from staff, but I needed to know what the licenses said. I wanted to know, and because there's a pecking order in this thing. I mean, the county says one thing, the state says something else, and the federal government says yet another thing. And I need to understand what the pecking order is. I mean, does the federal government control what happens down here in the county? Sounds like it does to me. And the state, same thing.
Well, it's always the pecking order, right?
I understand.
The feds control the state controls the county,
But I guess my point is this. My point is that for those of us, and I'm not saying anybody does, I mean, I take this fairly seriously.
Absolutely.
I've been doing this for a long time. I don't want to deny anybody anything that they have a right to do, period, end of conversation.
Right.
I spent too much time sitting in rooms trying to make distilleries and
Right.
breweries and
I remember.
wineries allowable.
Right.
Honest to God, it's for anybody to say that I'm up here and I'm trying to do something underhanded is just not accurate.
Well, I don't know anybody who's saying anybody's doing anything underhanded.
And what I'm saying is that we can only describe what we describe. And in my comments a minute ago, I said I did go out there. By the way, it was slippery, ice all over the place, and slipping and sliding, just trying to look around. That's all I did. And Stuckard was there. Hello. I saw nothing there that is not represented in the staff report or information provided to us by folks that are going to reach out probably tonight and say their piece, in the public hearing.
Right.
So when they reach out in the public hearing and we had that information is now ours, right? Don't
Certainly.
we base our decision on part of that as well?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So again, I personally never go any place unless I have a reason to go. I just don't. I've got plenty of stuff to do in my life. I don't need to spend a lot of time running up and down these roads. And to be honest with you, Mr. Chairman Thompson's right. This is a long lane. You're not going to sneak up on anybody. You're going to pull in the lane and they can see you coming.
Right.
So, and again, it was a wet, nasty, sloppy day and ice everywhere. And what I saw, I saw where the barn is. I saw where the house was. I see the narrow lane. I see down the hill there's a shed and there's a looks like hops. And the only reason I know that is because I grow hops. So I know what that looks like. So, and that's really the extent of it.
Right.
Again, I'm going to tell you, there's nothing in me that wants to deny these people, a brewery license on a technicality. That said,
Right.
when we set this in motion, we were very clear about what the requirements were for people to have farm breweries. It's not like it took 5 minutes. It was forever trying to figure that out. And so here we are, and one of the problems is, and I asked Randy earlier, and I said to you, we don't have in my mind a clear definition of a farm. Last week before last, I talked about 5 different definitions, and everybody's is different. The agricultural, they've got an 8.5 by 11 definition of what it is. Assessment office has one. Maryland has one.
St.
Right here.
Mary's has one. Are
St.
we
Mary-
talking about the right to farm? Are we talking about our zoning ordinance? Are we talking about our subdivision ordinance? I know, and there's...
And so what happens for us up here, we wind up being the bad guys. we have to make a decision one way or the other, and there's always going to be somebody on the right and on the left.
Right.
I think we need to do a better job rather than making it the Planning Commission's,
Well, the annotated code, and I'll pull it up, I don't have it in front of me, talks about the Planning Commission having a staff, the staff being, Lugum. And if you need more information, maybe we need to, make that process easier for you, that you need to pick up the phone and call Mr. Hunt or call Ms. Glenn and say, I would like to know A, B, and C. Why isn't there a traffic study? Why isn't there this? But we're getting, I don't mean to get away and just have a...
What we're talking about now is visiting. So Mr. Murphy brought up the issue with regard.
Well, the bottom line of visiting is this. It's a slippery slope, and it's a slippery slope because you could now base your decision on something you saw that nobody else here saw that's not part of the record, and that would be patently unfair to the applicant, right, if that were to happen.
There's no sense speaking this. I get it.
Right.
When I reached out, Mr. Murphy was talking about the reality of me reaching out with regard to a crosswalk. I didn't say anything to the county. That went to the applicant.
And that's fine.
And if I don't make that comment, I'm not doing what I'm here to do. Part of my job is to make it a better project, not to deny it. So anyway, okay.
I got you.
Quick question, Dave.
Yes.
It seems to me there's always going to be varying opinions on this type of stuff, not only site visits, but as I told you last week when we were discussing this, I tend to look up a lot of different stuff. And on this one, I looked up deeds. Now, not everybody looked up deeds, so I guess that's something that, I'm just going to disclose that, but
Right.
maybe we should have a rule that the applicant, the attorney, or their representative asks us in the beginning of the meeting, did anybody view, see, go, anything that wasn't in the packet? And everybody can say, well, I did this, I did
Right,
this. It just doesn't
right.
seem like it's, and I looked up deeds because a lot of the information from the people sending in public comments
Referenced it or talked about it?
referenced the roads.
Sure. And I get
access. So I wanted to look up
probably
and see
curious
what the
about
road
the
maintenance
easement or the
agreement.
road or, right.
I wanted to look up
And I get that,
deeds.
but you just put it on the record and say, gentlemen, I was curious about this. I looked up the deeds and, looked at the private road maintenance agreement or looked at what the easement language said. I get that, but Mr. Longmore should have the opportunity to know that you might be basing your decision on the fact that you've read this easement that nobody else has read or nobody else has introduced into evidence. That's the only point, is that he should be aware of it, so that way he can either say, well, you needed to look at Part 2 that maybe you didn't, or regardless. He just needs to know what happened so that he can,
I mean, when I can remember when this not first started, but I've been on here, this is my 6th year. And unbeknownst to me, we couldn't call State Highway, or we couldn't call another entity who was involved in these procedures. So, of course, we got our hands slapped a few times, and now I email Brandy or Mr. Hunt
Right.
and say, I'd like this answer from State Highway or whoever. This just seems like adding on to one more thing that we can't do to investigate just to see something that we may have felt we needed to see. And I'm assuming that maybe the board is just going to have to come up here every week and say, I made a site visit, I looked up a deed, and I looked up Maryland licenses that, because if it wasn't in the packet, I don't know what
you should always disclose if something
Okay.
outside of the evidence is, you've looked at.
But one other thing. For the last, with regard to the crosswalk, for me to suggest that it would be a good idea for staff to ask the state for a traffic study, because I ask to the applicant about a crosswalk, that is horribly onerous to the applicant. I mean,
Right.
those things, they don't give those away. And it's not as though it's an enormous, it's not like it's 235 and anything like that. It was just a suggestion.
I know.
So,
I'm just trying to keep everyone straight.
we're trying to do this job with our hands tied behind our backs.
We appreciate it,
And
Mr.
becomes
Weisskopf.
difficult.
Mr. Weisskopf, so I'm the outlier on this board here. I'm not born and raised in Southern Maryland. I'm from South.
And I heard you discuss this last week. I understand what you're saying, but if you feel that you need, evidence that's not in front of you or hasn't been supplied by the board, let us know. I mean, I don't know if they need to start,
Yes, well, let me continue if I can. I grew up in a rural community in Pennsylvania. They had townships and boroughs, not just the county, and it was a very rural township I grew up in. I grew up in a subdivision, a small subdivision from the 1950s, next to a 12-acre farm that grew soybean, it grew corn, had horses for a while, and I saw my community decimated by suburban sprawl. It's one of the reasons I got into planning in the first place. I'm here to preserve my adopted community to the best of my ability as a citizen. So my commuting patterns are from Lexington Park, up to 35. I go down 5, I go down 4. This is a property, of course, that is outside of my knowledge base. So yes, of course, I went and visited. And I'll tell you right now, for the record, I witnessed 2 people driving towards me or leaving the lane. It was about 2 hours ago. And then leaving the public right-of-way, 8 people, because most of the right-of-way is a public right-of-way with residential properties. I didn't see the level of commercial development from my public standpoint, from the public right-of-way, that would be concerning to me. It looked like just any other rural community, and I saw rural buildings, I saw, pole barns, I saw things that looked right for the community. And I used that information based upon what was presented to us to develop my own opinion. I don't know. I don't feel I did anything wrong. Like I said, I didn't interact with anybody. I didn't go onto the private property. I simply wanted to see what this looked like, because it's not in the development district where I, commute and what I'm most familiar with. Even our chairman said that, this is a part of the county, he's never been down that road. So, I just feel like that was information. Could we, as a committee, as a board, ask for all that extra information every single time an applicant comes to us? Absolutely. But I think in most cases, it wouldn't be benefiting most of the people on this board, but benefiting me, because I wasn't born and raised here. Now, does that make me not qualified as a member of this community to serve on the board? I don't think so. So that's where we have to kind of figure out, do we want to grind the wheels of justice to a halt simply because the applicants are assuming that everybody on this board knows everything about this community? And if every single time we have to say, well, there's some information we don't have, let's go back, let's do a site visit and stuff, that's going to grind planning to a halt. These projects aren't going to happen for 3-4 years down the line if we actually institute something like that. I feel what I did is in line with the ethics code of the Maryland Planning Commissioners Association, with the courses I took for ethics. As a former AICP planner, I think they're within the realms of their code of ethics. And I'm simply, letting the rest of the people knowing that, hey, this is what I did. I think I would not be doing my due diligence if I didn't do what I did today by visiting the property from the public right-of-way. So that's all I have to add to the discussion. Yeah.
Okay. Good evening, Mr. Longmore. Oh, you're still there, aren't you?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman.
Good evening,
Yes,
sir.
yes,
sir.
we're still here.
Okay. I think we've asked all our questions to staff. I think you've heard from the 3 board members that went out there. Is there any questions that you might have of us before we let you get started with your presentation?
No, I don't think so. I've been communicating with my clients during the conversation. We appreciate what the board members have shared about what they did. That helps us to know what has happened, but we don't have any objections to going forward tonight based on what we heard. So we're ready to go.
I think just about everything we spoke about is in the packets. It was just a
Certainly.
concern of where. So, okay, let's go ahead and get you started. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, members of the Planning Commission, thank you for hearing us tonight. We appreciate you taking the time to look at this application. What I'd like to do is I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully this will work. I apologize for having a hard time.
Take your time, Mr. Longmore. We took ours.
Yeah, I apologize. It's not pulling up the program that I wanted to share. I don't know why. Oh, here we go.
There you go.
Okay. Okay, so can the board see that?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So again, thank you for taking the time to consider this application tonight. We appreciate the report the staff gave. What I'd like to do is just introduce again who is here for us as far as the application. I'll be the one kind of emceeing the presentation, so to speak. What we're going to do after I speak for a moment now, I'm going to turn it over to Wayne Hunt to go through the site plan. And Wayne, I have those on this PowerPoint, or if you'd like to share your screen, whatever's easiest for you. But I can certainly use the slides that I've prepared. Wayne did prepare the site plan. He can discuss any engineering or site conditions that you have any questions about. Excuse me. And then I'll run through this use site type 12C. And just hearing the initial conversations with the board, I know there's some, kind of questions about this. I think this may be the first time this use has come before the Planning Commission. So I'll run through the provisions in our ordinance and some of the rules that apply to it. And then share with you some notes about the project that we think are relevant and important for both the Planning Commission to hear and the public to hear, based on some of the written comments that we've reviewed prior to tonight's hearing, to address some of the concerns of the neighbors and other folks that noted concerns. And we think that most of the concerns that have been raised are not really at issue in the project once the Planning Commission hears what my client's plans are and the conditions they're willing to have on their site plan approval. And then I'll have the site plan standards. I know the Planning Commission is well aware of them, but I can run through those and kind of highlight why we think we meet them in this case. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Wayne. If you want, I'll pull up your first slide, and then if you'd rather have control of it, let me know. But otherwise, just let me know when you'd like.
I'd rather have control if you don't mind.
Okay. So I'll stop sharing and then I'll let you go.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Hunt.
Good evening. Thank you, Planning Commission members, for having us here tonight. I wanted to, you've got a copy of the site plan there.
Yes, sir.
I wanted to work off of just this one sheet here,
What page is that, Mr.?
so that I could talk a little bit about the site specifically. Can you see my presentation? Or,
Yes.
Yeah, and I believe that is page 3
yes,
of our concept site plan.
page 3 of the site
Yes.
plan. Yes, blown up.
Yes, sir.
So I wanted to address a few of the concerns I read in the letters to the Planning Commission as well, if I may. I'd like to start off with the improvements and the statement that was made that these improvements are disturbing areas and all these extra improvements. And I just wanted to note that all of the improvements, all of the required facilities are on top of existing impervious areas. We are not creating new impervious surfaces. In fact, this plan, the disturbances that are proposed are here to make the plan better. We're proposing stormwater management to atone for the sins of the past owner and create a better plan. We're going to provide stormwater attenuation, stormwater management, the cleaning of the water in the microbiome facility. Also, was talking about disposal of waste products, and it will definitely be to this holding tank shown right here. As far as the size of the tank goes, I mean, it's 1,500 gallons. You pump it when it's full. That'll work out with the function of the brewery.
Where is that tank at again, Mr. Hunt?
It's right here
Okay,
in front of the building. It's going to be built under the parking area.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry?
No, I can see it now. I couldn't
Can you see
find
my
it now
hand on
before.
here?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Very good, very good. So that's where the tank is. It'll be under the existing parking area with the traffic-bearing lid for safety. There was also a note here about traffic concerns and the way that they were calculated. I just wanted to remind the commission that when we do our adequate public facilities and we do traffic initially for adequate APF, adequate public facilities, we are asked to use numbers that are provided to us in the zoning ordinance for preliminary calculations. And those are based upon square footage. So a note was made that even though the change or the use became less intense, the numbers didn't change, and that's the reason why. It's based on square footage and an industrial use. When we're doing these calculations, we're given our choice of residential, industrial, office, or shopping center, and industrial is what we used, and that seems to be the most appropriate here. It was also reviewed by the Department of Public Works and is deemed sufficient for APF purposes. This area right here, you can see that distance of 12 and a half feet is where the building exists. The ordinance in this use requires a 15-foot A buffer yard against the adjoining agricultural use. We will provide the plantings necessary as provided in the template for the A-type buffer yard in the zoning ordinance. All the plantings will be provided as required. It just won't be as wide as it needs to be for this one short section. I believe that takes care of my just going over this plan real quickly. I believe the rest of it kind of speaks for itself, so I would like to answer any questions that the commission may have of me now.
Mr. Hunt, when you were talking about the buffer area behind the garage area, I'll call it, is that going to require a variance?
Yes, sir, it is.
Okay. Just wanted that on record.
And Wayne, this is Chris Longmore. Just to follow up that question from the chair. The garage that's shown on your plan is already an existing garage on the property, correct?
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Okay. And the garage is already located where you're showing it, which is 12 and a half feet from the property line there?
Correct. These are all existing conditions, not proposed.
Okay. And as you mentioned, and I know Jada or Dave can confirm, that structure was not built by Mr. and Mrs. Stuckert. It was there, as you understand it, when they purchased the property, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So when you kind of mentioned that it's kind of correcting the kind of sins of the past owner or something to that effect, essentially this plan will, with the granting of that variance as needed, it'll actually add a buffer that is not existing to a structure that is already there. Is that a fair statement?
That's a fair statement.
Okay. And you also mentioned some stormwater management facilities. Are those the ones shown kind of to the left of the structure there? Can you just share with the commission a little bit of what they are and kind of what their purpose is?
Microbiome retention, what we're going to end up doing is that currently the roof drains right here just come out of gutters onto the ground from the building. What we're going to do is we're going to take that rainwater from the building and divert it into this triangular structure here. This triangular structure will attain some of the stormwater management and allow it to infiltrate into the ground and pond above so that it's released slower than it would naturally. And then it's also going to filter some. There will be an outfall device that will actually be down here that's underneath of the microbiome retention facility. I like to have those installed so that the device dewaters regularly and doesn't become a mosquito pit, which will also kill the plants that are required. It makes for a better functioning device.
And all of those are improvements that'll be added if the site plan is approved and this goes forward, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And the holding tank you mentioned, is that a whole, I think you mentioned this, but just so I was having a hard time hearing, I want to make sure it's clear for the record in the commission that holding tank is for any wastewater or water that comes from the brewing process. Is that your understanding?
That is my understanding of what its intent is, its intended purpose.
Okay. And I can have Dave or Jada confirm this. It's your understanding that will be, as needed, that would be pumped out, so there won't be wastewater going into the ground. Instead, it'll be pumped and disposed of in accordance with state regulations.
Yeah,
That's correct.
100% correct.
Mr. and Mrs. Stuckert, just to make sure, you did take the oath when I gave it out, right? Your picture wasn't on the screen?
Yes, we did.
Was it? Okay.
Yes,
I was
sir.
reading, I wasn't looking, so I'm just making
Yeah, I
sure.
got
I don't want any problems tonight. Okay. Thank you.
Hey, Chris, I had a quick question.
I think those are the questions I had follow up for Wayne. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mr. Van Kirk.
Oh, that's okay, thank you. Since you had mentioned the existing building, It seems to be that garage is within the 25-foot building restriction line.
Mr. Hunt will have to attest to this, but accessory structures are actually allowed within 5 feet of the property line.
Okay, that's what I was
Mr.
asking.
Bill Hunt should answer that.
Okay, and one other question. Could you take your cursor from the very bottom left where the driveway starts coming in and trace it along where it goes, just so we...
The driveway
Yes.
is here. The triple lines, that's the existing paved driveway that comes up. So that's the driveway there.
So the red line.
Then it comes all the way up, and it's shaded, it's lightly shaded in this area here.
Okay, we can't see that.
So there is, yeah, it's the line all the way up through here.
Okay.
The intent is, since this driveway is there, is that this drainage would go along the edge of the driveway without having to dig it up till it reached daylight.
Okay, thank you.
Who else got?
I did want to ask a question. Is that okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. and Mrs. Stuckel, this is Patty Robrack. I have one, did I say it?
Microphone. Pull it to you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, ma'am.
That's it.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. and Mrs. Stuckel, did I say it right, Stuckel?
Stuckert.
Stuckert. Could you answer a couple questions for me? First being, if you're not going to use that room, I mean, it's a brewery, but there's not going to be any tasting, or I believe I saw where there are not going to be other uses that are allowed in this provision. Could you tell me exactly, besides the brewery itself, what you're going to do in terms of having people come in and out, if you will, to maybe just even look at the brewery or to visit the brewery? Or are you going to have any what should I have? Should I put it in? Functions, thank you for the word. Any functions that are going to take place that will require a large influx of cars coming in and out of the facility?
I can answer that for you. So we are not proposing a tasting room. We're actually requesting that the Planning Commission put a restriction on us, saying that we cannot have a tasting room, we cannot have special events. The reason for that being is because we live on that property. We don't want people coming out. We don't want to do tours. We don't want to do tastings at this site. We live there. I don't want people coming out there on a daily basis. We have an alternate set of plans that have been submitted to the town of Leonardtown, and our tasting room will actually be in town. We don't plan on having anybody out to the property other than ourselves and our friends that come out to visit from time to time, but that's not necessarily brewery related.
Okay, thank you very much. That was important information to hear.
Of course.
Yeah, Ms. Stuckert,
And if there aren't other questions about the site plan, we did have some additional comments to make along those lines that might help the Planning Commission if you'd like, but if you have questions before that, we're happy to answer them.
Yeah, Chris, I have.
But are there any questions on the site plan before Wayne stops sharing?
Yeah. Chris, I have one on site plan. The well that's going to be used, that currently exists, the deep well? I see it there.
Yes, sir, it does.
And you guys will be using that well
Yes.
at the brewery as well?
I believe that's the plan. I'll let Jada answer that.
Yes, at this point in time, we do plan on using that well.
Okay, and this would be for Mr. Hunt. Mr. Hunt, on the site plan, under proposed use, the use type 12C, which is agricultural high intensity, a moment ago you referred to 3 different brackets that you could base this on. Is that the reason that this is agricultural high intensity?
Is that Wayne Hunt?
That was for Wayne Hunt.
Wayne Hunt, that's for you, not Bill Hunt.
That's for me.
Yes.
That doesn't sound like a question for me, to be honest with you.
I'm sorry, Wayne. I was asking.
Here, I'm sorry. I thought you were asking Mr. Bill Hunt.
No, I'm sorry.
I was waiting for that answer. Mr. Evans, I might be able to answer that. In the zoning ordinance on table 50.4, that's the table of uses. This use 12C falls within the agriculture use section of that. And it is on the chart called a high intensity use.
Right, and I guess my question.
I don't see anything else in the description of the use or anything that gives any other explanation other than that.
Right, okay. With regard, and this may be for Ms. Stuckert, with regard to not having a tasting room and the rest in the site plan, under parking requirements, there are 25 visitors, an estimated peak crowd. Is this part to be amended, or does that stay as it is?
I know what you're talking about, and I believe we'll end up having that amended. That would be an oversight on this plan, and it would need to be changed.
Do we have?
The parking was originally 1 space per 1,004 for the building.
Right.
And this 1 per 5 visitors at peak would probably need to be removed. That would change the total required to 4.
Okay.
So we would change the site plan accordingly.
Okay, so you guys would amend the site plan for that? Okay.
Plus, the applicant has also asked that they're not going to have a tasting room.
Right,
so-
yeah, I was
They'll
just asking
need-
about the site plan.
They'll need spots for any sort of deliveries, be it UPS or whatever. Mr. Fazekas?
So the 4 are still required.
Yeah.
Yes.
We'll have 3 with a handicap and a loading zone as required. It's the other 5 that will be dropped.
Thank you, Mr. Hunt.
So when it comes to variances, people who watch these meetings over time will know that I have an issue with variances. Essentially, a variance says I cannot meet the regulations of the county to build this property, and will you forgive me for, building this? And when it comes to new construction, my initial instinct is no. Somebody before me from the county decided we have a long-range plan, and we have, a blue book, if you will. It's not the right word, but anyway, a plan, if you will, for how the county is going to grow and accept growth while maintaining its rural integrity. In this case, we're asking for something less than 3 feet. And I've seen even Mr. Longmore asking for stuff double that for new construction. And as for the property owner, this is an existing building. They do not want to expand what's already there. And it's not their fault that somebody before them built this building that may not meet the standards that we have on the books right now. So I don't have any issues with the fact that the setback, the buffer, is not what needs to be. However, what my concerns are and this goes back to my site visit, is that the residential section of the road leading up to this property is paved, and it seems to work fine for the residents there. And when you go forward from that, it's a gravel, asphalt. It's not an asphalt, it's a gravel road. So my concern is that will anything that we approve or not approve today impact that part of the drive? And is there any way to accommodate that in the event that it becomes a problem? For example, I just drove my car back from the Philadelphia area last weekend, and I got a car washed on the way home. And I drove out to visit the site up to the public right-of-way, as I stated earlier, and I had a very nice, clean car. I turned around in the gravel part. I mean, I was really in gravel for less than a minute, and my car is now filled with dust. So the question is, like, in the operation of this facility, would for example, the traffic generated from people coming here, the two other families that are part of the brewery ownership, or people who are coming to remove the wastewater that is in the retention basin, I can't think of the right word right now, under the parking lot there. If that becomes a problem where the dust is constantly coming up, what's the solution for that, essentially?
I guess, Mr. Fizika, I'm trying to understand the question. I mean, certainly Mr. Stuckert or Mrs. Stuckert can speak, to the fact that there are no customers being invited on the property. As was stated in the application, there are two other couples, I believe, Jada, Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, that assist in that, and that's the extent of it, with no other even employees planned for this business. My understanding from them, and they can correct me if I'm wrong, that most of the materials that are used for this, either they bring in on their personal vehicles or they get delivered by companies like Amazon. They're smaller amounts that they need at a time for the ingredients that aren't grown on the properties, or they use their own pickup trucks for it. I guess a truck coming in to take out the wastewater is no different than a truck that comes in to take out a septic tank if one needs to be pumped. So I don't know that is difficult. If it's a dust problem, I don't know if I understand what you're trying to get at.
Well, I think my concern is I'm ignorant, okay? So I don't know just how many times per day, per week, per month would a vehicle be coming to take the wastewater from the processing they're planning on doing away. We talk, with a sewer, you have a septic system, okay, once a year, twice a year, depending on your household and the size of your system. How often, based on the proposal, you hear what I'm saying?
I mean, Dave or Jada, can you can you share what you expect, the frequency of that to be?
Yeah, if I could. So as far as the people coming to and from I know the neighbors are very concerned because they have noticed the amount of traffic has increased since we moved in. We do have 5 people that live in the household. There are 5 vehicles. We all go to work in the morning, and then we all come home in the evening. On the weekends and from time to time, yes, we do have friends over, so that adds to the traffic. And trust me, I do apologize for your dirty vehicle. We have to wash ours on a regular basis. We are fully aware. As far as the septic being pumped, obviously that's, once a year, maybe. If we were brewing on the capacity that we want to be able to brew, that underground holding tank would probably have to be pumped twice a year. As far as deliveries go, just like Mr. Longmore said, we mainly use Amazon, UPS. We really do try to buy local with our grains, so a lot of times we'll go and pick them up ourselves if we can. We do grow our own hops, so unless it's a specialty hop that we don't grow, then we're going to try to buy it from Amazon.
Of course.
So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does.
If not,
It does. So-
give me
so-
something else to go off of.
It's an absence of any other information, with the plans you have in place. There may be 2, let's just say for, 3 times a year that a truck was going to have to come to your property. So 3 additional trips per year where somebody might have to pump out that waste water from the use that you're proposing.
Well, of course. I mean, it's not, nobody else that I know of in the area has an underground holding tank like that. So yes, it is going to add a large truck coming in more often than normal. However, to offset that, our road maintenance agreement also requires that we pay part of the road maintenance fee. So we do have to pay the Wathans a certain set amount once a year to help with the road maintenance on the road. And we also have a tractor of our own and have offered to go out and do some of the maintenance ourselves.
Gotcha. And so what happens in the event that you're very successful, which is great, and now it's not 3 times a year, it's 6 times a year you're pumping out. Does your agreement with them actually take that into fact? Like, can you what's going to happen if you're, for example, you're very successful and the activities double in let's say volume?
I'll let you handle that.
So I think if that's the case, which we kind of hope it is, we hope we're successful. If that's the case, though, and it's required more often, we would certainly be able to, help with any additional maintenance on the road for sure. If not, take care of most of that, if it's even needed. It's a dirt road. It does need maintenance, and we're willing and able to help with that maintenance as much as we can. We certainly don't want to cause any damage. Again, it's our road to get to our residential property as well. Not our road, but it's our way to get to the house.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes, sir, Mr. St. Clair.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes, sir, Mr. St. Clair.
Joe St. Clair. Can someone tell me what the production rate is of your brewery and how much grain are you going to be purchasing a year?
So, yes, sir. It's a 7-barrel system. It's designed for about 217 gallons total per brew day. We'd have to calculate exactly how many, but it's roughly about 250 pounds of grain per brewing per brew day. We're expecting to have 5 fermenters, which allows us, after waste and all this, we're roughly about 1,000 gallons per month. So that's total brewing. So every time we brew, maybe 200 to 300 pounds of grain at a time, and we have a plan to distribute that to other farmers around the county who have expressed quite a bit of interest in it, actually. I hope that answers the question.
Okay.
Anything else, Joe?
Okay,
I
if
was
there are-
looking for total volume a year. You must know what that is.
Yeah, so, yeah, we're looking at
I'm looking for
maybe,
total.
each, like I said, each total per year is roughly 500 barrels. I know there were some estimates quite a bit more than that. The system would be capable of something like that if we all had the time and effort and we're working there 24/7. And we were trying to mass produce beer like, say, a Budweiser or something like that. We do something quite different, and we're limited by a lot of things other than just the equipment itself. So we'd be limited by ingredients, limited by water, limited by a lot of things. And our processes take a lot longer because we're looking for a much better product, and we age it a lot differently. So it takes us quite a bit longer to do some things. So I know there was a letter that somebody had done quite a bit of homework, and they're roughly accurate with an industrial style brewery. Again, this is a farm brewery with farming ingredients, and we would be at no way that capacity. It's simply impossible. We have full-time jobs as well, and this is a part-time venture for us.
I'm just thinking that we're looking at manufacturing because you're not raising enough hops or grains and producing it on farm like a regular farm would do. So that means you're going to be buying most of your ingredients and bringing them in, where there's quite a few breweries that are in industrial sites because that's considered manufacturing. Have you ever considered looking at a site where water through MECCOM is, versus what you're going to have to go through sediment control? In a memo from Soil Conservation, and I'm going to read it to you, everybody receives it. This was received July the 15th, 2020. It says, note, 3-acre combined lot and ag parcel does not meet the definition of farm under Soil Conservation District guidelines and is considered a residential lot. Therefore, farm brewery designation does not apply. Can you address that?
Sure. And Mr. Sinclair, this is Chris Longmore again. I'll be happy to address that, and then if my clients would like to as well. And I don't have it. I'm looking for that, and I do have the comment in front of me. I mean, respectfully, the zoning ordinance is what
it's a 10.
What was that? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Did you say something, Mr. Sinclair? I didn't mean to interrupt you.
I said it was on attachment 10.
Yes. Yeah, and I had that in front of me now.
No, go ahead, Mr. Longmore.
Yeah, I have a copy of that memo in front of me. Respectfully, the zoning ordinance is what defines what a farm brewery is in our county, what the requirements are for it. This comment by Soil Conservation District, respectfully, I don't think they have the legal authority to decide what the farm brewery designation is or is not. That is not within their purview that I understand. There's no requirement in the zoning ordinance that relates to their definitions of what they consider to be a farm or not. That's how I read this. And when you look at both the standards in our zoning ordinance and the standards that are required by the state and federally for this type of use, legally, I just don't think that applies, and I don't think it, is relevant. They did suggest that it's adequate for preliminary approval in that same comment memo. So I think that may be part of it. It might not fall under their definition of what a farm is, But that is not a requirement that a farm brewery has to meet the definition of what Soil Conservation District calls a farm, and there is no minimum or maximum acreage required for a farm brewery under our ordinance, and this provision was just enacted, less than a decade ago, so it's a fairly recent provision within our ordinance.
Just a comment on my part is that I've got 40 acres here where I'm at. That would take quite a bit of grain for me to put in even a microbrewery to put out 500 barrels a year. And I never did get the barrel size. Barrels come in different sizes, whether they're 50 gallon or whether they're 100 gallon or so. I don't know what that is, but I couldn't produce enough here on my small acreage. And in the grain specific, you have to get the farmer to do select grains like rye no, that's whiskey. Sorry, I was in the wrong one. In order to have beer, so you'd have to get the farmers around to select the type of grain that would have to be raised for their type of beer.
Yeah, if I could for a second. Yeah,
They said they expressed interest in supplying them with grain.
Yeah, I would like to find local and ingredients, and that's part of what we're doing. It's not just that we're trying to grow some of the things on our property as the state license requires, as we're doing with the hops. We think that's going to be sufficient enough for that particular ingredient. But yeah, sourcing barley, and we do use rye in some instances, has been a challenge. And we would like to work with local farmers. We do have a maltster, or a couple of them now, in Maryland that are also small businesses and growing. We have tried to source a lot of our barley, which is the main ingredient besides water, of course, in the brewing process. It's awful difficult. The area around this in Maryland is not necessarily the best for it, but we have read a lot of studies from the University of Maryland Extension. We know that they have some test fields up here, and that the farmers are finding that some of the barley that they can grow to the right characteristics is very beneficial, not only to their farms, but to their farm businesses, because it rates a higher price. So we would like to find local ingredients, not just barley, but honey, fruits, different types of things that we can use from locally sourced farms in the area, not just our own.
And Mr. St. Clair, if I could, we not only plan to just grow hops, we know, while we do have several on the farm, we know that we might struggle sometimes with, the bugs and the weather and keeping everything growing. We might struggle to be able to create enough. So we've also looked at other means of farming activities. I'm trying not to use the word farming too much, because by all means, we are not farmers. And we both know that we're not farmers. However, there are things that we can grow to use in the beer on the property. And per the state license, we only have to grow and have one ingredient in the beer that comes from the property. So we're looking at not only hops, but we've got a wild cherry tree. We've got wild blackberries that surround the entire property, and they are delicious, and we've used them in the beer. I love to dig in the dirt, so I want to do raspberries and blueberries, and these are all things that we can use in the beer. And I'm actually pretty good at making sure that stuff stays good until it goes into the beer, whether it's freezing or canning or jarring or freeze drying. I can do that all in my own kitchen.
Okay, I'm just a little surprised that you're using the word, don't want to use the word farm, but that's what you're coming in under, which is farm. I'm not taking that away from you. It's just like, I don't understand. I mean, it's okay to use farming but you don't want to use the term farming. I'm very confused.
Okay, if you don't mind.
Because a lot of times it's help farmers to preserve their farms by having a niche brewery on farms. We need to better decipher exactly what is a farm. And I think the comprehensive review, which is coming up, will help us a great ways, and also in aiding you as an individual as well. So.
And I completely agree with you.
That's all I've got.
I completely agree with you. I just want to clarify. The reason that I don't want to use the word farm is because we are not farmers. We don't own 40 acres like you do, or 220 acres like our neighbors do. We have the utmost respect for them and how they're able to do that process. Farm brewing, while yes, it is, a highly coveted thing, it is something that can be done on smaller pieces of property. That's what I'm trying to get at.
I think I consider that manufacturing, but that's neither here nor there. Thank you very much. I appreciate your candid and what you're trying to do here.
Ms. Stuckert, if I'm hearing you right, you say you're not farmers. Now, I mean, when I think of the word farmers, I think of Joe St. Clair, somebody that grows a lot. But you are farming. You're growing some of the product that you use on your property, more than one thing that you use for the making of the beer or whatever ingredients it may be. So, yes, you are a farmer. You can be a farmer with a small amount of acres. You can be a farmer like Joe and a lot of the other people that are down there, the Wathen family and all that, and do it, have big boy tractors and all that stuff. But you're still farmers. If I'm correct, and Mr. Longmore, you can join me on that. I mean, not just if you're growing, if you're doing something and you're growing a product that you're using to make whatever it may be, in your manufacturing facility, then you're farming.
And certainly, Mr. Chairman, I think one of the points we'll make in a moment, but it's probably worth noting now, is that as Mr. and Mrs. Stuckert were mentioning, the farm brewery licensing, they still need to get their license before any of this can happen from the state. This is one step in that process to get the local zoning approvals necessary for it, and then they move forward with their state licensing. And the state licensing has requirements in order to obtain and keep one of these licenses. As they mentioned, a requirement of that, and where I think the name farm brewery comes from in that statute, is that you do have to grow at least one of the ingredients that you use on your property where you are brewing the beer. And that's what they intend to do. And as you've heard tonight from their testimony, certainly it'll be the hops that they're growing there now, but they have plans to hopefully expand and have other things that they grow on their property, regardless of whether it's 3 acres or 40 or 220 acres. They plan to grow there and use that in the beer that they're going to create there in their brewery. So that's where the designation of the term farm comes from. And we can certainly understand when somebody hears the word farm brewery that they may have an expectation in their mind of what that may mean, and that it may be a much larger piece of property or a different type of property or a large farm. But the definition that the state has given that they will need to meet in order to get their final license, that's essentially the criteria, and they believe, they're hopeful that they'll be able to meet it, or they wouldn't be here tonight asking for this approval.
Okay. Do you all want to go ahead and finish your PowerPoint presentation? It'll probably
that'd be great if we could. We got kind of, and this might address some of your
Mr. Chairman, I want to ask one more question, Mr. Longmore, and then I'll leave you alone for your PowerPoint.
Oh, no, sir.
Are the Stuckerts brewing now?
If you all want to answer that, so it's testimony in the record since I can't testify.
No, we are not. So we had a previous license at our previous residence. It was at 645 Miriam Lane. We had a separate building there, and we had a small 600 square foot building that we were using under a different license. Since we moved here and have now sold that property, we have not been brewing. We don't have the equipment set up. We don't have the ability to brew, and we're asking for permission here to get that started. So we've now gone, at least since November, producing beer at our other property, even though we sold it in February. So we still maintain a license, Class 5, which is a different license. We still report zero production every month, as directed by the authority here in Maryland to do so. But no, we have not produced any beer for sale.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Okay, Mr. Longmore, please go ahead.
Thank you. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll share my screen again. So this was we already went through the site plan. This is the full site plan in case there's any other questions of the board, and I'm trying to advance it. So these are the other pages that were within the site plan that was provided, and it's online on board docs showing the structure as well in case there were questions of the look of it. And then this was the last page of the site plan with the detail that I believe we already looked at. Now, a couple of points just to make about the use that we're talking about. Some of this we've already touched on, so I won't belabor it. What I have showing before the Planning Commission now is the way that the use type is described within our zoning ordinance. It is use 12C. And you can see that it's defined essentially as a facility operating under the Class 8 farm brewery license that Dave was just describing to you. The definition in the ordinance does have the language that it may include facilities for sampling and retail sales of beer, promotional events, and kitchen facilities. Again, my clients, both because they want to preserve their property and not have those activities, but also to assure, bluntly to assure their neighbors that have raised some concerns about it. They're happy to accept a condition on their approval tonight that would not allow them to have retail sales or promotional events or kitchen facilities to serve to the public as part of this. So that is something they wanted to make clear. I know we've touched on it, but wanted to share that and state that affirmatively. The property is zoned RPD. I saw that in some of the letters that were written talking about, is it, should it be in that type of zone? Should it be in residential or in the RPD zone? I would just note that our zoning ordinance has only one zone where this type of use can be, and it is the RPD. So it was clearly the intent of our commissioners when they adopted those provisions that the RPD was an appropriate place for this, and in fact, the only appropriate place for it in our zoning ordinance. We did pull the zoning ordinance and look at the requirements for our farm brewery as well. We think we can meet those all. Of course, we're here seeking the site plan approval this evening. Adequate parking, we've already touched on that, so I don't know that we need to anymore, and that can certainly be lessened now that there is no intent for a tasting room or a need for any of the retail parking spaces that would have been there. Again, my clients are willing to have a condition that there will be no promotional events on this property, so that they don't, if we're not going to have them, they won't need to comply with those sections of the ordinance, of course. And the same thing about the product sampling and retail sales of beer. They may certainly, I'm sure, on their property have some type of administrative office functions just because they are intending to run a business, but it would be more for them individually. And no, again, they don't plan on having any employees, as we've discussed. And then the maximum footprint relates to the sampling area in those other spaces, which again, they're not seeking and would welcome the condition that it not be there to alleviate the concerns of the neighbors. The There is a definition in the zoning ordinance just to allow the planning commission to know this, and this also touches a little bit on the question about the comments in the soil conservation memo. It's found in the definitional sections in the very back of the zoning ordinance, and the definition simply says it's a facility operating under a Class 8 farm brewery license pursuant to Section 2-209 of Article 2B of the annotated code. I think that portion of the annotated code is now called the alcohol article, but regardless, that's the section that applies to it. And again, Mike, this is in the written staff report, and I think we've touched on it enough, but to make it clear for the record, one of the things my clients will need to do is to obtain that license from the state. And as mentioned in the last part of this slide, there are conditions they need to meet. There are requirements they'll need to prove to the state they can meet. If they are not successful in that, of course, your approval today will not mean they can do brewing there. They need that state license in order to do it. And there is no minimum acreage requirement in our ordinance there. I know that seemed to be some of the questions of some of the public comments that were made before the hearing. A couple other things just to touch on. A lot of this we've already done, but in preparing for tonight, we didn't want to forget to raise these issues. It is an existing structure on the property, so it's not any construction concerns or adding a structure that's not there. It's already there. Again, there's going to be no retail operations of any kind, no customers coming in. As I read some of the letters that I know were dated before my clients sent out their letter to all their neighbors explaining what they intended to do. There were folks that were concerned about customers coming in and the size of the road and potentially, drinking when they were at the brewery and then driving down that road. There'll be no retail operation, so we hope that'll address those concerns. We've talked about the underground wastewater storage tank. We saw those concerns from the neighbors. Wanted to make sure it was clear that there would not be runoff that would be harmful as far as the wastewater goes. I think Mr. Stucker touched on this a little bit in response to your question. Mr. St. Clair, the spent grains that are not, after the process is done, there are local farmers that are interested, and the Stuckerts are working with them to provide those spent grains to local farmers so that they can use them in feeding their animals. And again, this is a very small business. There were some concerns raised ahead of time that it would be large or there'd be a lot of employees or a lot of customers. Of course, what you've heard tonight shows that is not the case. And then we have the concept site plan criteria. I'd be happy to run through these once we hear from any public comment that'll be here tonight. But that's essentially, I think, the facts of the proposal that may not have been clear in the either staff report or to some of the neighbors and some of their comments. I would like to say, and this is on board docs, and I'll stop sharing that now, and we can get back to it if we need any of the slides. There is a copy of a letter on board docs that my clients did send out to their neighbors and to the names of individuals they had to address some of the concerns that they heard at the last hearing date before it was continued, and to try to address those in a proactive way. I know I appear in front of this planning commission and the Board of Appeals as well often, and I know there is often the comment that folks should try to work with their neighbors and keep them informed of what they're doing. I was very pleased that my clients wanted to do that, and they did that of their own accord. So we would just like to note that that's in the record and that it's on board docs as part of the materials there. I think you've heard a lot of what their plans are, but of course, they're both here willing to answer any questions. And Mr. Hunt is here if you have any questions specific to the site plan. We'll be happy to answer them, and then I know we'll have an opportunity for public comment. I would like to reserve the right to address any of those after and do a brief summary once any neighbors or other members of the public have spoken.
Okay, any questions?
Yeah, I have a quick question. Mr. Longmore, as I mentioned before we started, I reached out and downloaded information with regard to brewery licenses, and there were 3. And Mr. Stucker just shared that he was operating, I guess in Calvert, under the 5 license. And this information I got is from the University of Maryland Agricultural Law Education Initiative. There are a couple of paragraphs in here that sort of stood out. One of them, and let me say this, I'm not interested in getting in the way of any small business in St. Mary's County. You know, a lot of us spent a lot of time making sure that we could do distilleries and wineries and breweries. I don't know, and I understand what you're saying about the CZO currently. I will tell you that the original impetus for the farm brewery was to try to find ways for added revenue for farmers, and that was, and of course the tobacco buyout is behind us now, but that was really the impetus, and it really wasn't meant to to be probably the way it's written. So, but that's the way it's written now. So anyway, my comment is this: in the first in one of the paragraphs here, it just goes on, and I'll read it. Maryland has created a few new liquor licenses that make small-scale brewing easier. One of these is the Class 8 farm brewery license. The license is just for farmers and is especially useful because it allows for on-site consumption of the beer, not just sale. Any farmer with a Class 8 farm brewery license may sell, deliver beer from the farm brewery to a wholesale company or directly to an individual for consumption. I'm going to read that into the record. The other part that I see on the second page of this, which I need someone to explain to me, the pecking order. We talked about this earlier, whether it's federal, state. In my background, it's always been, you know, I want to do what's best for the county, and I want the county to make its own decisions. I don't want the state to make decisions for us. But sometimes we find ourselves where we find ourselves with regard to decisions made by others other than us. Anyway, in this paragraph, it states, a federal law to bear in mind is that commercial alcohol production cannot occur on a residential property, even if your land is zoned as agricultural. Your home, if it's on a farm, is federally considered a residential property. You will need to provide a variance from indicating that the residential portion of the property is perhaps on a separate parcel, or that the prospective brewing site is not part of the residential section of your property. And I bring this up for one reason. I bring it up because what I don't want to have happen, whatever happens here tonight, I don't want to have someone move forward with a project and find down the line that there's an issue with the state that prohibits them from going forward, or there's an issue with the federal government that prevents them from moving forward. That is not beneficial to anybody. And so I bring that up just for that information, Chris, and I don't know really what to do with it. I mean, other than that's
Sure.
You know, the information I got. So.
Well, no, we appreciate that. And I think coincidentally, and I don't know if you saw this, Mr. Evans, on Board Docs, I think, and I apologize, I'm looking at it to make sure I have the number correct. On public comment number 26,
Right.
I think there may be a copy of that from the Maryland University of Maryland Extension.
Yeah, it's there.
The last point, just to
I'm sorry.
the last point to let you know, and
Yeah, what I was going to say is a lot of this
So
I had downloaded before I got the information. So, yeah, but anyway,
Right.
it's just informational.
certainly,
Chris.
yeah.
I mean,
Right, and the question about the residential use on the property, my clients are well aware of that. They had told me about it before I saw that come up online. They had actually had that material as well. You'll see that there is essentially part of the application where you need to inform the regulatory agencies, the federal and state ones, that there is a residential use on the property,
Right.
and you need to get their permission from. My clients know there's a risk that might not be approved, but they understand that risk and they're willing to go forward with it. But I appreciate you raising that tonight, and they are aware of that and intend to pursue that.
So
If I could just quickly maybe address the, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
If I could address the pecking order question that you, it's our understanding that we get a local approval first, and that local approval is then used to assist with getting the state and federal licenses. Neither of those two things can go forward without a local approval. And we went through this process once before on a little bit smaller level with our Class 5 license and had the same variance, had to get local approval in Calvert as well, and went through the process then. So that's the way we understand it. We must get the local county approval first for the brewery, and then we use that approval to, in essence, as part of the application process.
Right. And
for
Mr.
the
Stuckey,
state
I don't
license
deny,
and
I
the
mean,
federal license.
I don't question that. My concern is, and I understand what you believe to be true, what I don't want to have happen is if you move forward, the federal people look at you and say, well, why are you here? You were told you can't do this based on this information. I mean, I'm telling you, I don't want to get in your way. I'm just trying to explain to you that, I've been in business for a while. And so this due diligence thing is like an albatross around my neck. I cannot not do it. So I want to make you aware that however this goes, that moving forward, that the state could get in your way because the state does. And the federal government can certainly get in your way because that's what the federal government does. So just saying.
Mr. Weiskopf, could I ask you a question? So if let's just say we were move forward with this tonight, and I know they've asked some conditions about, the sale and not having the sale. Could a condition be that, they have to get those, or is that an automatic?
That's automatic. I mean, this is no different than any concept site plan that comes before you. This is the very beginning stage, right? Here's the drawing we have. Here's our concept. Do you approve it or not? If you do, then they've got to go to final site plan approval to lug them, and all those things are answered, right? The adequate public facilities, a final call is made on that.
Then the state, I just wanted to clarify whether we had to make a condition, to.
For example, and I don't mean to interrupt you, I'm sorry.
That's all right. I'm used to it, Mr. Weiskopf. Go ahead.
But it'd be like somebody coming forward wanting to build a bar, right? That here's our plan for the design of the bar, knowing full well that they've got to, at some point in time, go in front of the Alcohol Beverage Commission board, Alcohol Beverage Board, and request that they get a license. They could be turned down, right? It's not a right, it's a privilege.
Okay.
So it's no different than that.
And so I have another follow-up to that. So when an applicant for anything, doesn't matter, whatever it is,
right.
What I would do, I would go out to the powers to be and say, this is what I want to do. Can I do it?
Right.
Is it possible for me to do it?
You wouldn't build a garage first.
I would not. No. And so, I would go to EDC, I would go to Land Use and Growth Management, I would ask the question.
Right.
And maybe this is for them, the applicants, but I wouldn't just hang my hat on this. I would use a lot of.
Certainly. My understanding of the variance required at the federal level regarding the house is a pretty pro forma type thing. It sounds like they've got one before, so they're probably of the same. But, yeah.
Right. I don't know.
That will be out of our hands at that point.
Oh, certainly. Certainly. But if they don't get it, they're not. It doesn't matter that you've approved it or not.
That's.
I would rather say it here tonight than find out down the line, I'm not going to drink any of that beer. At least not from here, from that location. I just want everybody to understand what's ahead of them.
Certainly.
And perhaps they do.
Certainly.
But I feel better about actually saying it. So.
Right.
Mr. Fazekas?
Mr. Thompson, thank you. I'm just really confused that there's any discussion whatsoever about if this is a farm or not. I grew up on Mr. Spicer's property. Mr. Spicer had 100 acres in Pennsylvania, and when needed the money, he subdivided, and 50 acres became the subdivision that I grew up in. And I was at a dead-end street next to his 50 acres of property. When his wife died and he got old, he took about 48 acres of that and leased it to a, I don't know what the term is now, but sharecropper, somebody who came and farmed on his land, but he had, no other involvement with it other than owning the land. On his 2 acres, and this is the 2 acres that I lived right next to, he produced apples, peaches, strawberries, a little bit of soybean, and a few other things I'm not even aware of. And pretty close to us in our own township, we had townships in Pennsylvania, we had the 4-H Club and the Grange Fairgrounds. Mr. Spicer would win almost every category for the stuff that he farmed on his farm. He lived on the property. It was about 2 acres. So the fact that we're even questioning whether or not this is a farm or not is just way over my head. I just don't understand. It doesn't make any sense. When I drove out today, I didn't see a Walmart. I didn't see somebody trying to develop a dollar store, a Dollar General. I saw agricultural activities. I saw people growing crops. I'm not a farmer. I don't know what kind of crops they were. I don't know, how viable they were. But clearly, the property is being used in agricultural purposes. So I think that this board should be, taking that variable out of the equation. We're talking about a farm and somebody who lives on the farm, and they want to continue the farming that was done on this property probably for hundreds of years. Now, they are not 5th, 6th, 7th generation, and that's fine. But at some point, that property was sold. And with that selling of the property, sold the rights of certain parts of the property. This owner now wants to continue farming on his property, and I don't see where there's any contention, any issues with them continuing that long practice of farming on their property. So that's my statement. That's all I have to say.
Anybody else have any questions?
I do. I have a question. Mr. and Mrs. Stuckert, this obviously, as you know, came before us back in February, and I noticed that on May 1st, you sent a letter to your neighbors clearly outlining your plans and trying to calm them down and address some of the concerns that they have had. So my question to you is, and this is just, along the lines of, goodwill and being good to our neighbors, have you heard back from your neighbors since you sent that letter on May 1st? Have you had any communication with them whatsoever since then?
Yes, actually, I had one gentleman call and one that had signed the petition opposing and letting me know that he appreciated the letter and our sentiment in that letter, and he would changed his mind and now supports the brewery. So we had one call. That's the only interaction I've had. But did you have some others?
I did receive one call as well, not from the dirt portion of the road, but a little further down on the paved portion. And they said the same thing, that they truly appreciate the fact that we sent out the letter. There was apparently some miscommunication. They didn't understand that what we were asking for was in fact what we were asking for. They were under the impression that we were going to have something much larger with a lot of customers and big events and fireworks and concerts, and that's not the case at all. So they were just very appreciative.
And if I could add, I mean, we're not developers. We're not used to doing this. I'm not, especially not used to doing this kind of thing. And had I known that I needed to reach out to our neighbors as such and explain a little bit more, I most certainly would have done so. And I certainly didn't mean to cause any contention there. And we hope that letter kind of satisfies some of their concerns. We understand, probably not all, but we hope. And it's our sincere promise to our neighbors that we are not going to have customers out of the brewery. We're not going to disrupt any more than just getting to and from our brewery ourselves at our home. So,
Thank you.
Apologies for interrupting.
Howard, I got a question.
Mr. Van Kirk?
Mr. and Ms. Stuckert, you guys are very lucky that most of my questions have been answered, so you'll have me very short, just a short time. I noticed earlier you guys said that you're not going to be having a tasting room, no events. So will the sole purpose of the Class 8 farm brewery be brewing on site? I know you haul it off for sale or whatever. So the only thing you're going to do there, other than growing whatever percentage you choose, because there's no limit on that for use, is brewing.
Yes, absolutely. We brew, and we have a separate limited distribution license, which allows us to distribute that beer to local retailers.
Sure, and
that's our plan.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's okay. Go ahead.
I was just if we have time with everything else that's going on, that we may come to a point where rather than just kegging the beer, we might can it or bottle it. It's just going to depend on time. Like Dave said, we both work full-time jobs. So it's kind of hard to find time to brew and bottle and design labels, but we're trying.
But I mean, that's still part of the brewing. The only reason I'm asking that is because some of the letters that was sent in gave 20 different things that this license allows you to do on the property at some high levels. But I guess the only reason I'm asking you is because if all you're doing is brewing, and I mean, we would know that you have to package it somehow, whether you do a keg or a bottle or a can. I don't consider that tasting or events, or consider that part of the brewing. I'm assuming that would have to, you got to do something with it, however you haul it out of there. I guess what I'm asking is, I think Mr. Longmore had indicated that you would have no problem with conditions if this was to move forward in an affirmative way of strictly saying that even though you're getting a Class A farm brewing license, you would be willing to limit it to brewing. Is that what you were saying earlier?
We're actually requesting that.
Okay.
Yes, we're actually requesting that you give us the conditions to say that we are not allowed to do those things on the property.
And as just a note, our previous license, Class 5 in Calvert, we were also allowed in a residential area, and we didn't have any customers or any tastings, so these are conditions that we're well used to.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Evans?
Yeah, I have a quick question for Stuckerts. You guys are currently, or were previously or currently, you have a Class 5 currently, is that right? That you were using in Calvert? So what is the upside of moving from a 5 to a farm brewery for you guys? I mean, is there a reason for doing that? I mean, is there an upside to doing that, given all the restrictions we're talking about? I mean, I don't know.
Sorry, we unfortunately, our screen had seized up there and everything was kind of frozen.
Yeah, could
We
you
didn't quite
repeat
hear
that?
the question.
You're actually going to make me say that again?
I'm so sorry, the
No,
screen
that's okay.
I didn't
froze.
hear what you said, sir.
So currently, you're operating with a Class 5 license. Is that right? Or you have a Class 5 license? You're not making any beer. So you've
We
applied.
were operating with Class 5. We are not right now.
Well, anyway, but you had a Class 5 license. So now you've applied for
Yes, sir.
a farm distillery license. So what's the upside? I mean, typically you move from one license to another because there's a benefit to that. So what's the benefit? I mean, because I'm not in a brewery business. Could you share that with me?
Well, essentially, for our purposes, it's actually more restrictive. We had a Class 5, which is a pretty much an unrestricted industrial manufacturing license. It did limit you on anybody coming to a brewery because there's a 3-tier system which includes the brewer, the distributor, and the retailer. But for us, we wanted to do the way it benefits us is we wanted to do a farm or the processes for the farm, the ingredients in the farm, which is the purpose of us trying to buy a bigger piece of property here in St. Mary's and use that in our craft beer. We wanted something local. We wanted something that we could source locally, say that we made it or created. We didn't just put ingredients together. We grew it from the earth ourselves, at least a portion of it, a small portion. And then we can try to source it from other local areas, like I said previously. That's really the intent, is really have a local craft brewing product. And we thought we could best do that with a farm brewery.
So with your
and
Class
it may
5
allow us to do, yes, sir. Go ahead.
So with your Class 5, you did not, you didn't do that? I mean, you didn't wind up using local ingredients, that kind of stuff? You wound up getting it from Amazon or whoever you got it from?
We had tried. Yeah, we had tried it, and actually that's kind of the genesis of the idea, is we were trying more and more to use Maryland source ingredients. There's no limitation to doing that in a Class 5. Really the difference was we were a very small one-barrel system. We want to go to a little bit bigger, have a little bit bigger area, and grow a lot of the stuff ourselves. And that's really and we felt a Class 8 was more suitable.
Yeah, so one of the impetus with regard to farm distilleries, with regard to what Mr. Fasica said, one of those was that farmers were going to have an opportunity for another revenue stream, and that they would be able to use grain, whatever, hops, whatever, that was generated on the farm. That was the impetus, really, for the farm brewery. I mean, there's other opportunities, you know that well, and the county has addressed those as well. So that's why I was asking about the difference between the two licenses, because with regard to, again, to Mr. Fasica's, back in those days, we were looking for opportunities for farmers to be able to subsidize their farms because of the tobacco buyout back in the day. And so having product that came off of their farms was important. So Tobacco Barn Distilleries, for example, grows corn. Now, it gets other grain from other places, certainly, and I'm happy about that, especially if it's local. So I just want to address what it was put in place for. Now, whether that's where it is now, that was the impetus of having the farm breweries, distilleries, wineries, and all the rest of that. So, thank you, appreciate it.
Any other questions? Ms. Roberg?
Yes, I have one more question. I believe it's for our lawyer, Mr. Weiswell. My only question is, can we legitimately restrict the zoning regs that are published? By that I mean, where it says a farm brewery may
Put
have
conditions on them? Certainly.
conditions on it.
You regularly do that from time to time, and you're certainly allowed. And in this case, it's, sometimes I guess the question would be, are you being too restrictive? Or are we delving into the, quote unquote takings arena? But Mr. Longmore's clients, the Stuckerts, have made this really easy because they want those conditions if it gets improved. So you certainly can do it. Does that make sense?
You know, was
Yeah, oh, certainly.
concerned if somebody tried to overrule us,
No,
could
no.
they?
Not on that regard, no.
Okay.
You'd be fine.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else? Okay, hearing none, we got two options.
I have one question for our attorney. Mr. Chairman,
Yes, go ahead.
can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Go ahead, Mr. St. Clair. Go ahead, Mr.
Okay,
Weiskopf is
what
ready.
prevents anybody else in the RPD of having, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
I know the 7th District is a long ways away, but can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Can you hear me, Mr. Weiskopf?
Yes, sir, I can.
Okay, what prevents anybody else what prevents anyone else in the RPD with 3 acres of ground from doing the same thing?
Absolutely
Does this
nothing.
set a precedent? In other words, if I had 3 acres and decided to want to put okay.
No,
You answered my
there's
question.
absolutely nothing. I mean,
Thank you.
in full disclosure, well, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? All right, we've got two options. We can move right into public testimony, or we can take a small break.
I have 3 people waiting, at least.
We have 3 people waiting, at least.
Let's go.
I say go.
We are now opening public testimony. I ask that as you call in, you give us your name and address, please, and I will give you the oath one at a time as we go. Brandy, you want to see who the first one is?
Yep, let me see if I can do this right.
Give it a good shot.
You have reached the St. Mary's County Planning Commission public hearing for 20-132-011 Bretton Bay Brewery. Request for concept site plan approval. Please state your name and address, and Chairman Thompson will ask you to take an oath before you make your comments or ask questions.
My name is Raphael LaRue, and my address is 2795 Longmore Street, Leonardtown, Maryland, 20650.
Okay, could you give me your name one more time, please?
Raphael LaRue, R-A-P-H-A-E-L.
Okay, sir, do you declare and affirm, raise your right hand, please, do you declare and affirm under the penalty of perjury that the testimony, responses, and statements you may give will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, thank you, sir. Go ahead with your testimony. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, well, my name is Raphael LaRue. I'm a co-proprietor of Bruder Garden Beer Garden at Shepherd's Oldfield Market. My mother was online as well, and she is also a co-proprietor of the beer garden. However, it's just a little bit past her bedtime, so she had to hop off. However, I will say that I believe I speak for her when I state that, we were both here today to voice our support for the approval of Bretton Bay Brewing's concept site plan. Our beer garden has been fortunate enough to have had the opportunity to be one of the first bars to carry their products back when they had their previous license. And they have proven themselves to be exemplary members of the small business community. I believe I heard one of the members speak about goodwill, and I don't know that I've ever met any business owners that had any more goodwill than Dave and Jada. They directly, through their efforts helping us when we were just a fledgling, when we just had the thought of opening a bar, they have been there to support us nonstop. And I can honestly say that I don't know that our bar would be open if it wasn't for their tutelage and their guidance and their friendship and our partnership with them. So I just wanted to comment on today's meeting and state that they are exemplary members of the small business community, and I personally believe that their brewery will not only benefit our business community, will but will benefit our residents as well. And I can tell you from personal experience that there is a whole lot of demand for their products. So with that being said, that is my public comment.
Okay, are there any questions from the board for Mr. LaRue?
No, sir.
Mr. Lawmore, do you have any questions?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman. None.
Okay. Thank you, sir, for calling in.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll take our second caller.
Good evening. You have reached the St. Mary's County Planning Commission public hearing for 20-132-011 Bretton Bay Brewery, request for concept site plan approval. Please state your name and address, and Chairman Thompson will ask you to take an oath before you make your comments or ask questions.
Okay, could you give us your name and address, please?
Hello?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Did you hear what I said?
Yes, I said my name is Karen Watson Elder. My address is 40145 Watson Road, Leonardtown, Maryland.
Okay. Stand by for the oath.
Okay, before I give you the oath, what was your last name, please?
It's Elder, E-L-D-E-R.
Okay, thank you. Okay, do you raise your right hand, and do you declare and affirm under the penalty of perjury that the testimony, responses, and statements you may give will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
I'd just like to say that I am the immediate neighbor of the property in discussion today. I want to start by saying I prepared a statement which has been, I'm going to just toss that out the window and say I'm just gravely disappointed in the lack of communication and transparency that we have had with the Stuckards. I want to start by saying that initially when this concept site plan came to be in July of 2020, there are several comments on the Facebook page of this business saying that the intention was to have the public come back to our property and have a tasting room. In addition to that, we asked the Stuckards when they moved in, my husband asked, do you intend to have the public come back here? The answer was yes. So for everyone to say on oath that obviously this is not what they want to do now, I think it's important for the Planning Commission to understand that when I petitioned the road, when all of these months have gone by, we have heard nothing from them. I'd like to also ask a couple questions that, I want to have a good relationship with my neighbors. I'd like to share that this piece of property has been in my family for over 200 years. And the comment that why is this even in question, I want to come at that from a different angle. The question here is that the Stuckards don't own the farm that you travel through to get to their residential property. I don't understand how we can consider this not a commercial business. I don't understand how this would have zero impact on my community and my way of living. If you traveled the property, which some of you did, you'll notice that there's a house right before theirs. I'm right there on the edge of the road. Not just the dust and the dirt. I have dogs. I just had a baby. I have a child that, why should it be that I have to fence my property in and change my way of living for the Stuckards to benefit on their own business and profit on their own business next to my property? Like I mentioned earlier, it is of huge disappointment to us that they didn't just knock on the door when they moved into the neighborhood and say, hey, this is what we had in mind. The letter came after, however many months. So the letter was addressed on May 1st. The letter was never addressed before the petition came of the neighborhood, before we wrote publicly to say that it was said on Facebook several times, it is said in the community that they have bigger plans for this than what they're making this appear. Furthermore, I'd like to add that to have a farm brewery and then pass this as presidents in the community with all of these conditions on it feels a little backwards. You know, if we have to pass this by saying, but you can't do X, X, and X, then is this setting a good example of St. Mary's County bringing breweries down? I mean, if I lived in Wildwood, this would never happen. You know, this is a totally different situation. And I just want to ask a question to the board that we'd like clarification on. If there are going to be no employees to this business aside from the owners, how are you going to operate a tap room in another location that this beer that you're going to make on this piece of property, this residential piece of property, how's that going to work? If this is your part-time gig, you're going to open up another place where you're going to serve the beer off of our property, which is great. I just am curious how you can run a business with 0 employees part-time and do that. In addition, there is a road maintenance agreement in place. To date, the Stuckerts have not paid their road maintenance. They haven't tried to come pay their road maintenance since all of this happened. So I just want to mention that that road maintenance agreement is also for a residence. It is not for a business. So I think when you're adding a business to that agreement, I'm just curious from a legal perspective, and I'm not a lawyer, does that change the terms of that agreement? I don't know the answer to that, and I certainly would like to know. I don't want bad blood with my neighbors, but I want to preserve the quality of life and the agricultural integrity of this farm the way that my ancestors would have wanted me to. So I just want to further iterate that this proposal not only presents dangers to the residents of the Watson Road community, but it also threatens the preservation of our farm. In this operation, I hope they're successful. I hope they grow. But I really hope they do that somewhere that is not an immediate neighbor to my farm. And that is my public comment.
Okay, thank you. Questions from the board first?
So I have a question for the caller. So your statement is that your family's owned the property for a couple hundred years. Has the property only been for residential use, or is there any farming done on this property before it was transferred to the Stuckerts?
I'm sorry, was that you're not coming through very clear. Are you asking if this is the first commercial business that's been on the road?
What I'm asking is, prior to the Stuckerts owning this property, was the property and the property where you live and the adjacent properties only used for primary residence, or was there other activities taking place on these properties?
Sure. I think you're referencing the previous owner of the home there did have a logging business. And I will say this, he also maintained the road, and he also paid road maintenance to us his entire time that he lived there, in addition to maintaining the road. So I will say that was the condition of, yes, somebody else did run a business, didn't involve alcohol. It was a little county guy, home business, sold a little firewood. It was totally a different operation.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that your family and the prior owners used this property for business purposes, but that your concerns are that the Stuckerts have not contributed their fair portion to the maintenance of the private road. Is that correct?
Yes and no. The prior owner of this property was actually a relative of our family. So it changes the game when the person that is doing this is a part of your family on your family farm.
Right, but the property has been sold by your family to a different entity, the Stuckerts. So they do not have any less rights to that property as your former family who owned the property. Is that correct?
I mean, yeah, you can say certainly that that's correct. If that's
yeah. So what I'm hearing is that your concerns are that these the current owners pay their fair share to maintain the private road, and that then they can then continue to use the property just like your family had done in the past in some small volume commercial activities such as selling lumber or producing some beer from the property. Is that correct?
I didn't catch the last part. I'm sorry. Can you repeat yourself?
Well, I was just saying that the Stuckards are proposing to use the property for some financial gain, no different than the former owners, which were relatives of yours, in that they are, they're not logging the property or selling that resource, that natural resource for financial gain, but they are producing a different non-logging natural resource who they also are trying to sell for financial gain. Correct?
Correct.
Okay. So what I'm hearing right now is that your biggest concern is that this is not going to be a huge wholesale, industry in your backyard. And I'm not going to relate to that. But it doesn't seem from what we were presented today that that's going to be the issue. They are trying to do the same thing as your relatives in the past had done, and they are growing something on their property. It's not trees, it's hops and whatever, and they are trying to sell it to the public. But I do hear your concern about the maintenance of this private road. And it's unfortunate that in the selling of this property from your family to a non-family member, that this wasn't, at least in your terms, what I'm hearing, wasn't properly addressed. But I think that, if we made some conditions in approving this, where the applicant is agreeing to pay their fair share in maintaining this private road, that your concerns would be less, correct?
Correct, but I also think that this speaks volumes for the county in setting an example. In looking at other people, think about how many people have farms that are like ours, that somebody who was a relative, either there was a divorce, there was a falling out, somebody got bigger, needed to move, whatever, where you may have a parcel or two on a farm, and then this will turn into what you can do in the future. A lot of farmers in the future may be impacted by this type of situation. If you drive back there and you see, if they're successful in this, the continued traffic, the expansion, there's no way of us knowing by just saying, okay, you're not going to have a tasting room, you're only going to brew on a small capacity, which still has not been fully disclosed of how many barrels and gallons. There's no clear number for anybody to go by. I can say, yes, you are correct, but this is not the way that the county would like to set the precedent, I don't think, on doing this for the first time.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Let me ask a quick question to Ms. Elder. I think she asked a question to the Stuckards if they had employees, and I don't think that got answered. I think you stated earlier you did have a few, but I wasn't 100% sure. Just to answer Ms. Elder.
Yes, excuse me. No, we don't currently have any employees right now. We're 3 families own the brewery. We do have plans for downtown and Leonardtown, which may include employees at that location, but there will not be any here at our personal residence or at the farm brewery. And just back to some other comments, we'd absolutely make right our responsibility for any road maintenance. I'd be happy to do so. Our deed is rather old, and when we bought the house, we weren't quite sure who to contact or who to make that right with. But now we certainly do know, and we'll make sure that is made right.
When it's due in February.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. and Mrs. Stuckert, you currently have a copy of the road maintenance agreement. Has it been provided to you?
Yes, we do have a copy, Mr. Evans.
Okay.
It was part of the deed when we bought the house.
Right, I know they travel with the deeds.
rather
I didn't know whether it was after the fact or not. Okay.
Anybody else? Mr. Longmore, do you have anything? Any questions?
No questions. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Elder. Okay, do you have any other callers, Brandy?
Yes, I do. Good evening. You have reached the St. Mary's County Planning Commission public hearing for 20-132-011 Bretton Bay Brewery, request for concept site plan approval. Please state your name and address, and Chairman Thompson will ask you to take an oath before you make your comments or ask your questions.
Okay, could we have your name and address, please?
I'm thinking there must be a delay. Hello?
Caller, could you give us your name and address, please?
I heard someone trying to talk, but
Pardon
I
me?
thought I heard someone trying to talk.
I heard something.
I think I
but
heard
I'm not-
myself in the background.
Oh, is that what it was?
That's what it sounded like. I kind of recognize the voice.
It says connected.
Caller, could you give us your name and address, please?
I can hear something and I have the volume up.
I think you can hear me.
Is that you?
Sound like it.
Caller, could you give us your name and address, please?
So somebody's there.
I know that guy.
What do I do?
What do we do, Mr. Wisecoff?
We have two questions.
If you can hear us, caller, could you hang up and call back, please? We're having a problem getting through to you.
The issue that the farmers have is that it's called farms. Not that
Okay.
it's really, it's that.
Sorry about that.
We bought so much.
It's okay. If you got somebody else.
He's tried to help maintain.
Good evening. Good evening. Hello.
Yes?
Good evening. You've reached the St. Mary's County Planning Commission public hearing for 20-132-011 Bretton Bay Brewery, request for concept site plan approval. Please state your name and address, and Chairman Thompson will ask you to take an oath before you make your comments or ask your questions.
Yes, my name is Matthew Plant. I live at 43888 Simonwood Way, California, Maryland, 20619.
Okay, sir, I'll give you the oath now. If you'd raise your right hand. And do you declare and affirm under the penalty of perjury that the testimony, responses, and statements you may give will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I'll give you the oath now. If you raise your right hand, do you declare and affirm under the penalty of perjury that the testimony, responses, and statements you may give will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth? I'll give you the oath now.
And sir, can you turn your TV down, please?
Yes, sorry.
Thank you.
Hold on 1 second. Sorry, there's just a slight delay.
Okay, go ahead, sir. You have 3 minutes.
Okay. It's turned down.
Okay, go ahead. We can hear you.
You have 3 minutes. Sir?
Mr. Plant, can you hear us?
You can start your testimony now. You have 3 minutes.
Got it. So I manage a small business just 10 minutes away from where this meeting's being held. I'm unaffiliated with the Bretton Bay Brewing business in terms of actual financial connections. I have worked with the owners on several ventures in terms of events and helping me with beer equipment and stuff, I think it would just be a disservice to the community, because I know that they were brewing in a different county before. Right now, they are trying to move into this community, bring another small business. They're just nothing but charitable guys. They've done nothing but help us. I do not know why we would not allow them in here. I do not know anything that they would bring to this community that would be a negative to the community. I think they only bring positive. That's really all I want to say, though. They're great guys. I've worked with them before. I think it would just be a great addition to the community.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Plant. Hold on for a second, though. Is there any questions from board members? Mr. Vizier?
Matthew, you mentioned that you worked with them in the past on events. That just threw up a red flag for me, because the applicants are stating that in this capacity, there will be no public tasting room or public events. First of all, I want to make sure that I heard you correct. Is that correct, what you said? And then I'm going to ask the Stuckards whether or not that's applicable to this application.
Is that correct, what you said? And I'm going to ask the Stuckards whether or not that's applicable to this application. Is that correct, what you said?
Yes, so Dave only, I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? I could not hear you at the time.
You'd like me to repeat the question?
Would you like him to repeat the question, Mr. Plant?
I'm sorry, yes. I need someone to repeat the question.
Yes, Matthew. I'm sorry I didn't get your last name there. In your statement, you mentioned that you worked with the Stuckards in prior events, and that they were upstanding people, and I don't remember exactly all you said, but that rose a red flag for me, because in this particular application, the applicant is stating that no public tastings or events will take place on the property. So I just wanted to make sure that I understood your first statement before I asked the Stuckards a question. So is that what you stated? Am I misrepresenting your statement?
Yes, the events have been at the business that I manage. It's not been on their location ever.
Okay, and so for the Stuckards then, my question would be that just to clarify that in this application, and assuming that it does go forward, that a condition of no public tasting rooms or public events would not be a concern on your part.
No, sir, it would not be. At our location, those will not be part of our business whatsoever.
All right, well, Matthew, thank you for
have
your,
done off-site.
Okay, Matthew, thank you for your testimony.
Okay, any other questions? Mr. Longmore, do you have any questions for Mr. Plant?
Thank you.
No questions, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Plant, for calling.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do you have anybody else, Randy?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
Quite a few. Good evening. You have reached the St. Mary's County Planning Commission public hearing for 20-132-011 Breton Bay Brewery. Request for concept site plan approval. Please state your name and address, and Chairman Thompson will ask you to take an oath before you make your comments or ask your questions.
Good evening. My name is Matt Lillard. I live at 2052 Canancy Lane, Leonardtown, Maryland.
Okay, Mr. Willard, if you would you please raise your right hand, and do you declare and affirm under the penalty of perjury that the testimony, responses, and statements that you may give will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, sir. Go ahead. You have 3 minutes.
Yes, I just wanted to call in this evening and express our support for Breton Bay Brewing. We've gotten to know them over the last 6 months. We have, my wife and I, when I say we've been very impressed how well they've supported the local community and the local businesses, and we are fully in support of their effort to start this farm brewery. We know that starting a business can be very difficult. Brett and Bay reached out to us, and we worked with them to start our own business. And it is my understanding that Brett and Bay will be no less than the third farm brewery in the county if they were to be approved. So we just wanted to call in and express our support for them in this venture. Thank you.
Okay. Hold on one second, sir. Is there anybody on the board have questions? Mr. Lawmore?
No questions, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Willard.
Thank you. Good evening. You have reached the St. Mary's County Planning Commission public hearing for 20-132-011 Bretton Bay Brewery. Request for concept site plan approval. Please state your name and address, and Chairman Thompson will ask you to take an oath before you make your comments or ask your questions.
My name is Tom Russell. My address is 41530 Oxen Court, Leonardtown, Maryland.
Okay, Mr. Russell, if you would at this time raise your right hand, and do you declare and affirm under the penalty of perjury that the testimony, responses, and statements you may give will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you, sir. Go ahead, Mr. Russell. You have 3 minutes.
Yeah, I want to give my bona fides relative to the Watson family. My mother was Barbara Watson. She was the third of 4 children dating back to the 1920s, 1930s. And Karen, the young lady who called in earlier, lives in my parents' former home, which, by the way, is the third home that's been in that location. That's how far back the farm goes. I really am in a state of emotional tumult and turmoil, and so is my extended family as they have listened to this. I really want to know how we got here, and I'm talking functionally. Back in February, we thought that the postponement was because it had been found that the brewery use was not compatible on an RPD lot because it was not a farm. We went through all kinds of definitions about farms. Well, now I hear what the interpretation is, and I'm willing to make a bet that the due diligence did not turn that up, whether it was with EDC or Lugum. I would like to know what they had to say up front about this, because where I'm going with this is I would bet significant money that this interpretation came courtesy of Mr. Longmore. I have great respect for Chris. I've done a lot of work with him over the years, and this sounds to me like lawyer talk. I think if you go to that document, what you will find is that it's relative to those ancillary farm uses that were intended to be supplemental incomes to farmers, and the assumption was that the word farm was self-evident. In this case, we have, I think, a bastardization of that interpretation in that apparently it can be anything. And therefore, if you have an RPD lot anywhere in the county, folks, you apparently can do a brewery. It does not make a whole lot of sense on the surface, and it doesn't make sense countywide. I think that this is a minefield, and I wouldn't be surprised if this is a problem in the future, which I bet it will be. There'll be a language change or interpretation of a minimum lot size to constitute a farm. I really can't express how upset the family is with how this all was done. They feel Pearl Harbored by the process. The Stuckarts, for whatever reasons, and I'm not judging them, but they did not do much of a job in making contact with any of the family members, and I believe there's been one discussion about the road that was less than fruitful back in the wintertime. The road is hellish. It's a gravel farm road. It freezes and thaws. It falls through. It's really not much of a road. However, the issue that I think needs to be discussed is water usage. I'm not a brewer, and I'm just doing the Google machine thing here, but it looks like depending on what your brew process is, it can be highly intensive amounts of water, where if they're doing anything in the low to moderate range, 200 gallons of beer is going to result in about 14 to 1,500 gallons of waste, meaning that the holding tank will be pumped every time that they brew a batch.
You have 1 minute, Mr. Russell.
Explored in terms of the math and what that means or doesn't mean for the operation. I also want to talk about the road easement. I'm not familiar with the road easement, but is there any wording or verbiage in there that limits it to residential traffic only? Because this certainly, as Mr. Sinclair said, is industrial or commercial or whatever you want to use. It's certainly not a load of soybeans going out or a load of firewood going out. Let me see what other comments I made.
Can you wrap it up, Mr. Russell?
I think I'm going to close there. I know that this looks like a done deal based on this interpretation, and we are shell-shocked as a family unit. I can assure you of that, because this really is out of left field. We assumed that a farm was a farm was a farm, and so I'm not doubting that there is no acreage requirement with it. But are we loopholing? Are we living up to the intent of what the regulation was and it was supposed to serve, or have we found an end around? And this certainly smacks of an end around. It certainly looked like the folks' intent all along was to do this. It's just that the Watson family and the rest of us feel like this was done in the dark. That's the end of my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Russell. Any questions from board members? Mr. Lawmore, do you have anything?
No questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Russell.
Thank you.
Good evening. You have reached the St. Mary's County Planning Commission public hearing for the Bretton Bay Brewery request for concept site plan approval. Please state your name and address, and Chairman Thompson will ask you to take an oath before you make your comments or ask your questions.
Hi, my name is Stacy Watson. I live at 27212 Barton Street, Mechanicsville, Maryland.
Okay. If you would, raise your right hand, and do you declare and affirm under the penalty of perjury that the testimony, responses, and statements you may give will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes, sir, I do.
Okay, go ahead, Ms. Watson. You have 3 minutes.
Just to reiterate the other points that have been brought up tonight, I think the main issue here is that the Stuckerts are not farmers. They have a residential lot of 3 acres. That's a garden. That's not a farm. I think we're setting an incredible precedent here. If you approve this, you're basically saying anybody that has this amount of land can make a commercial brewery on their property. I mean, I know the regulations you guys have said themselves are very fuzzy, but at the end of the day, do you consider 3 acres a farm? I live on 11 acres with my boyfriend. We have chickens, we raise turkeys, we raise ducks. I don't consider myself a farmer. That's 3 times the amount of land that they have. They're not farmers. They have a garden. This was intended for farmers to supplement their income. They don't produce enough grain to even create their own product. They have to ship stuff in. It's not a farm. It's a garden. It's a hobby. If they wanted to continue their Class 5 license, why didn't they do that? Why did they apply for the farm license? They obviously wanted to use some of the other regulations to have extra, things like a tasting room and all that. And as we heard earlier from Ms. Elder, that was not part of, what they disclosed initially to everyone, which was nothing. But I just think that it's an incredible precedent that you're going to set if you approve this. I mean, anyone that has a 3-acre lot in RPD is going to be able to have a brewery. That just seems a little bit not what this was intended to do, which was to help farmers. And she said herself, they're not farmers. And again, the issue of wastewater, that was brought up before. We're not entirely clear what the production amount's going to be, what that wastewater situation is going to look like. No one has the clear numbers on that. The third point that I want to bring up is the road maintenance is one thing, and obviously everyone needs to take care of the road, and the increased traffic is going to cause some issues. What about liability? are we liable as the landowners when people travel through our land to get to their property for something, if something were to happen, God forbid? I mean, how is their business supposed to be the liability, on our roads? I'm not a lawyer, but that clearly is going to be an issue as well. Like, I just don't see how you can buy a 3-acre residential property inside of a farm and then call yourself a farmer. That's probably the end of my comment.
Okay. Is there any questions from board member, Mr. Fazekas?
Ms. Walther, I heard in your testimony that you stated that you lived in Mechanicsville. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
You stated in your testimony that you live in Mechanicsville. Is that correct?
Yes, I live in Mechanicsville, but I mean, full disclosure, I used to live in the property that Miss Elder lives in now. I lived there for about 10 years before I bought the property in Mechanicsville, and I am part of the Watson family, which obviously owns the farms that is surrounding their property.
I understand that. Do you currently own property along that that right-of-way, the private drive?
I currently do not own any of the property that is surrounding the residence, but I did used to be a resident of Mrs. Elder's property, which is right next to their property.
Yeah. No, I understand your concerns, but at least currently, in terms of this application, there's no liability on your part or the part of your immediate family, meaning your husband, your children, etc. Is that correct?
I mean, I'm just thinking in terms of there's increased traffic or if somebody comes in and there's an accident and it's on our part of the land. I mean, as a landowner, wouldn't the landowners be responsible for if something were to happen?
Right, Ms. Walther, I'm asking you, are you a landowner on that property or on that right-of-way?
I'm not a landowner currently, but eventually, yes, I will be a landowner of the property. It's owned by my father, who eventually will pass it to me, so it will become my concern, and when he passes.
No, okay, I understand. As for your second question about the wastewater, I think that was addressed earlier with the plans they proposed with the underground storage tanks they would use. That would be vehicles could forget the words, but could be on top of it, and that would be pumped out on a regular basis. So I guess, I'm just wondering what is your concerns about this new property owner using the property the way that your family and others prior to your family have used it in terms of farming? Because one more question, I guess, before you answer that. Have you been down that private drive recently?
I mean, I've been all over that farm. I grew up on that farm. I've been out on every inch of that farm.
Okay, but have you been there recently? Because I drove by today, and I stated that earlier in the testimony before this meeting started, and I saw crops growing. So I don't know where crops growing on a farm does not indicate that they are farming. So can you clarify that for me? Like, what in your own mind and definition is farming? Because if I saw crops growing on their property, what in your mind and your testimony says that this is not a farm?
I mean, in my personal definition, I would say a lot of the lots in Bretton Bay are probably 2 or 3 acres. You're telling me everyone in Bretton Bay has a farm because they grow tomatoes or they grow, some corn in their backyard? Like, how does that make you a farmer? There has to be a clear definition from either the county or the state or the government or whoever that says this is a farm, this is what a farm is. And you guys yourself said that definition isn't exactly clear for this license that they're trying to apply for. So to me, it's like, I have 11 acres. I raise chickens and turkeys and ducks. I don't consider myself a farmer. This isn't a farm that I live on. This is a house that has chickens and turkeys and ducks on it.
Well, right.
So where do you draw that line? I think that line needs to be a lot more clear. If you're going to apply for a license that says farm in it, farm brewery, what is the definition of a farm?
Yes, well, Ms. Walther, you come up with a good point, and that is that the definition of a farm is not consistent. And another board member brought that up both last week at a previous meeting and today as well. So there is some inconsistencies in what defines a farm. And I will agree with you, there's some ambiguity on what that is. But from my own personal experiences, I grew up with somebody who had only 2 acres, and he was an elder in the community, and he was, one of the #1 farmers in the community for the produce and that he produced in those little 2 acres. And unfortunately, he had 100 acres to start with, and he had to sell it off over time to afford his lifestyle of continuing to be a farmer. So, the fact that you and your family do not choose to use your 11 acres, as you stated, in farming, is your choice, and that's great, and I respect that. But this property owner, who owns about 3 acres, wants to use their farming, their property for farming, and according to regulations that I'm hearing in this testimony, in this hearing today, they are within their rights to use their property to farm.
I mean, I see the point there, but I mean, anyone can have a garden. I love to garden, but I'm not sure that really constitutes a farm in terms of the legal sense and the tax implications there or whatever else. I'm not a lawyer, but I'm just saying.
Yeah. Well, that's all I had to ask of you, Ms. Butler. Thank you very much for your testimony.
Any other questions? Excuse me, from the board? Mr. Longmore?
No questions, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Good evening. You have reached the St. Mary's County Planning Commission public hearing for the Bretton Bay Brewery. Good evening. Hello?
Hello?
Hi, can you turn your TV down, please?
Sure. There you go.
Okay.
Thank you.
Could we have your name and address, please?
Can you please state your name and address, and Chairman Thompson will ask you to take an oath before you make your comments or ask any questions.
Yes, my name is Geraldine LaRue. I live at 41635 Camelier Drive in Leonardtown, Maryland.
Okay, Ms. LaRue. I ask you to raise your right hand, and do you declare and affirm under the penalty of perjury that the statements, responses, and testimony that you may give will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, go ahead, ma'am. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, we do have a very bad connection. I can hardly hear you. But I'll go ahead and make my comment. What I wanted to address is I am a business owner, and my son did call in earlier for some testimony. But I do want to assure any question that anybody might have about the Stuckards holding a tasting room or events at that farm is not going to happen, because I am in an agreement with them for them to lease space in my building at Shepherd's Oldfield Market for a little mini brewery and a tasting room there.
Okay.
Activities are going to be happening.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Is there any questions from the board?
Real quick
Mr.
one.
Vazquez.
Is that an exclusive agreement that you would have the any events and tastings at the Oldfield Market?
No, it's not exclusive, but I think the whole idea of their events is really in the brewery line of seeing, beer being made. They're going to have probably 2 or 3 small tanks in there with an area that you can see behind the glass. And that's what people are coming for, really, because at any other bar, if you just want to sit down and drink something, you know, we've got a number of bars in Leonardtown that can be done. This is specifically a tasting room and that they're going to be having there, and it's quite large. It's not just a small one that would be able to accommodate a number of people.
Thank you, Mr. LaRue.
Okay.
You're welcome.
Is there any other questions from board members? Mr. Lawmore?
No questions. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Oh, what just happened there? Where did they go?
Did you blow the phone up?
Maybe they'll call back.
Back. All right, let's do this again. Good evening. You have reached the St. Mary's County Planning Commission public hearing for the Bretton Bay Brewery request for concept site plan approval. Please state your name and address, and Chairman Thompson will ask you to take an oath before you make your comments or ask your questions.
Could you?
My name is John Held. Address is 21854 Potomac View Drive.
Okay. Could you turn your television down, please? And and if you could you raise your right hand, and do you declare and affirm under the penalty of perjury that the testimony, responses, and statements you may give will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Can't hear you very, very well, but my hand is up.
Well, I'm taking your word for it.
We just gave you the oath.
Yeah, no, I got it. I've taken the oath.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I just can't really hear anybody over the line is all.
Push that down there like that.
Okay. Yes, sir. Go ahead with your statement. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Yeah, so I just wanted to speak on behalf. I'm a small business owner of 2 businesses in Leonardtown, and the way that I see it is I have to order all of my beer from out of the county, and from somebody that's not from the county, that's always lived within about a half an hour to 25 minutes of a brewery. I mean, it really is painful as a business owner to have to order from out of the county. I think it's atrocious that it's coming down to a tale as old as time in the county, where it's a bunch of people with the same last name calling about something that they don't want. Everybody's talking about the 1920s and how deep their family goes. What about the future? When do we get to start looking after ourselves? When can we get over the way that things have been and start looking after the community and people that actually care about the town and aren't worried about just about themselves? And unfortunately, it seems like Dave and Jada have gone out of their way to offer up as much as they want to do to help with the road. And from what I've been told, outside of Dave and Jada, they don't want that help. They're not here to even entertain the idea that there's something slightly responsible going down the street for the community. That's really all I have to say.
Okay, hold on a second, Mr. Hill. Is there any questions from board members?
I have a question.
Mr. Evans?
You say you're a business owner?
Yes, sir.
Good, congratulations. It's hard being in business. It's hard being in business. So
absolutely is.
I will tell you that there's nothing about Mr. and Mrs. Stuckert that I don't want to see be successful, quite frankly. I want to see them be successful. But I would take exception to the fact that there are people that work very hard in this community, perhaps such as the Stuckerts, to make possible you being able to have a business in St. Mary's County. So I take exception to your comment with that regard. I think that there are any number of businesses here that give back to the community every single day, every day. And so, again, I have absolutely no reason for the Stuckerts not to be successful. And that's not why we're here, about the success of the Stuckarts, I will tell you, everybody that called in and said they had great beer, I don't doubt that for one moment. I would be willing to bet you it's terrific beer. But we're not here whether or not their beer is terrific. We're here with regard to the ability for them to open a farm brewery on a 3-acre parcel. And whether or not they are Wathans or whether or not whoever they might be, people have the ability to call in and make these comments, much like I'm making these. So I appreciate you calling in, because a lot of folks simply don't. They sit on their hands and don't make these comments. But so anyway, I appreciate you calling in. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity.
Is there any other questions? Mr. Lawmore?
No questions, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Good evening. You have reached the St. Mary's County Planning Commission public hearing for the Breton Bay Brewery request for concept site plan approval. Please state your name and address, and Chairman Thompson will ask you to take an oath before you make your comments or ask your questions.
This is Harrison Hoffman. I live at 28705 Point Lookout Road, Loveville, Maryland, 20650.
Okay, Mr. Hoffman, at this time, would you raise your right hand, and I'll swear you in? Do you declare and affirm, under the penalty of perjury, that the testimony, responses, and statements that you may give will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you, sir. You have 3 minutes. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to call in on behalf of Breton Bay Brewing. I've known them for a couple of years now, and I don't see any issue with anything that they've done everything the right way from the start. They've gone through the right channels to get this accomplished. It's a dream of theirs, and I don't see why anyone should turn down that dream. I actually have worked in the brewing industry for roughly 5 years now. And I actually used to work at a farm brewery myself. And as far as anyone who has called in to, deter this or show any concerns, that to me sounds more like it's a family issue and not really an issue with the people who have done everything the proper way and tried to accomplish a dream of theirs.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Is there any questions from the board? Mr. Longmore?
No questions, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hoffman.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Good evening. You have reached the St. Mary's County Planning Commission public hearing for the Breton Bay Brewery request for concept site plan approval. Please state your name and address, and Chairman Thompson will ask you to take an oath before you make your comments or ask your questions.
Zachary Houston Steele, 44710 Beechwood Court, apartment 610, California, Maryland.
Sir, could you say your name again, please?
Yes, sir. It's Zachary Houston Steele, 44710 Beechwood Court, California, Maryland.
Okay. Could you spell your last name for me?
S-T-E-E-L-E, Sierra Tango Echo Echo Lima Echo.
Okay. Go ahead, sir. You have 3 minutes.
Yes, sir. I'm still a concerned citizen, and I've been watching the entire briefing, and I had a question. Earlier in the day...
wait a second, sir, before you start.
Mr. Steele?
Mr. Steele?
Yeah.
Hold on 1 second.
The oath.
I didn't give you the oath. I've done it so many times.
I cannot hear anything you're saying. Give me 1 second.
Okay. That's good. That bails me out. Thank you.
I am ready to take the oath. Sorry, your comms are horrible right now.
Okay. Raise your right hand, and do you declare and affirm under the penalty of perjury that the testimony, responses, and statements you may give will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I affirm.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Go ahead. You have 3 minutes.
Yes, sir. Just one thing I'm trying to, again, concerned citizen, and earlier in the day, Ms. Stuckert said that they had paid road maintenance fees, and someone had called in saying that they weren't paying road maintenance fees. I was just seeing if the council will be able to find out whether or not that is true.
Well, speaking for this one board member, I think we're going to straighten that out before the night's over with. Just one board member's opinion. So, Mr. Longmore, do you want to make a statement, or the Stuckerts on that?
Outstanding, sir. No, I greatly appreciate that. That's fine. That's the end of my comment.
Okay, thank you, sir. Hold on.
Yeah. And Mr. Chairman, I can certainly speak to that. And Jada or Dave certainly chime in with any response you want to make. What I will say is I have looked at the road maintenance agreement. We see these types of road maintenance agreements all the time. They are very old. They do say the property owner shall contribute. They don't say where to send it to. They don't say who collects them. It just says that the property owners will kind of collectively maintain the road in proportionate shares, essentially. I know my clients have said on the record they're ready, willing, and able to do that. I think Dave, when he testified before, when Ms. Wathen Elder testified, said that the dues had not gone to her. He, I think, testified that now they know where to go to. I don't get the sense that they've ever had any that are due. They've only been there about a year or less than a year now, and the dues are annual. So for all those, my clients are here willing to pay that. I will say that has legally nothing to do with the application, but my clients luckily are willing to pay that and have said on the record they will.
That would be good of the clients, get caught up with the road maintenance agreement. Shows good faith within the neighborhood. I know they didn't have the chance before, didn't know.
Absolutely. I think they've said.
Now that they know, that can be taken
And I think they've said repeatedly that they will. So.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, just a quick note. I don't know if it has any bearing, but since I disclosed earlier in the meeting that I had looked up a couple deeds from the Stuckerts and when they purchased from the Howells, and I did see the road maintenance agreement, I just wanted to make the note that I did observe that I did not notice the word residential. As I've heard from numerous letters and testimony, I'm not saying it has any bearing on me. I'm just saying that I did not. I've seen it in a lot of public comments, and I didn't look back 3 or 4 deeds, but on the Howells and on the Stuckerts, I did not see the word residential use. Just wanted to disclose that so everybody knew, same thing that I seen.
Okay.
Or didn't see.
Thank you, Mr. Van Kirk.
Thank you, Mr. Van Kirk.
Is there any questions from the board members? Mr. Longmore? Anything else?
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Steele.
Good evening. You have reached the St. Mary's County Planning Commission public hearing for the Breton Bay Brewery request for concept site plan approval. Please state your name and address, and Chairman Thompson will ask you to take an oath before you make your comments or ask your questions.
Rita Weaver, Wills Road, Dameron.
Okay, Ms. Weaver. At this time, I'll ask you to raise your right hand. And do you declare and affirm under the penalty of perjury that the testimony, responses, and statements you may give will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay. You have 3 minutes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Okay, and I apologize if I'm asking a question that's already been addressed. I lost internet service partway through the meeting, so I'm just kind of coming into this with my question now. So this property is listed as residential, and I looked it up and I saw the property surrounding the applicant's address, and they are also listed as residential, with one large farm listed as agriculture. So if approved, this brewery in a residential area, would this not be setting precedents for anyone in the future to set up a brewery or another similar operation in a residential area? And number two, due to it being listed as a farm brewery, if approved through the process, if they go through the whole process, will the land then be eligible for agriculture exempt status? And that's all I have to ask or say, but I'm going to stay on the line so I can hear the response.
Okay. I can't answer number two.
Because that's a tax classification.
Okay.
Is that what you're going to say?
I can I mean, I'm not a tax person, but I just sold a 30-acre property in the RPD, and it's under a current agricultural forestry management plan. And to remain in the same status, they had to fill out that settlement paperwork that said it was at least 5 acres. Is from that property. I'm just saying that was on this particular property, same zoning,
Yeah.
same use. So I'm just saying I'm pretty sure it's 5 acres. And I'm sure Mr. Longmore knows he does more real estate than I do anymore. So.
Mr. Hunt, Mr. Weiskopf, y'all want to make a statement about that? Is this a farm or is this residential? I mean, we've heard from the applicant that they're farming on the piece of property that they bought.
What you're seeing for residential, what everybody's seeing when they see residential is the tax classification. That's how it's being taxed. The zoning is RPD,
Right.
Rural Preservation
That's what I'm saying. But they farm on that, and they can farm on that.
Absolutely.
Okay. Question's been answered.
There you go.
I just wanted to see if y'all were with us.
I'm awake.
Awake. Okay. Okay, is there any other questions from Ms. Weaver? Mr. Longmore?
No questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Weaver.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I think one more.
Don't tease me.
Good evening. You have reached the St. Mary's County Planning Commission public hearing for the Bretton Bay Brewery request for concept site plan approval. Please state your name and address, and Chairman Thompson will ask you to take an oath before you make your comments or ask your questions.
Sure. I'm Greg Page. I live at 42280 Hanover Court in Leonardtown, Maryland.
Okay, Mr. Page, before you get started, I'll ask you to raise your right hand, and do you declare and affirm under the penalty of perjury that the testimony, responses, and statements you may give will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, thank you, sir. You have 3 minutes. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to call in support of Bretton Bay Brewing. I guess I also wanted to point out, having been on the property several times, when you look at the size of the building, the bays that are there, the oil stains that are on the floor, and then when you go to the bottom of the hill and you look at the number of bays in the covered area that is at the bottom of the hill, it's fairly obvious that the previous owner operated a number of heavy vehicles and maintained those vehicles on the property. So I think any amount of additional traffic or wear and tear on the road would probably be minimal compared to that. So I guess I just wanted to point that out specifically. I think you guys touched upon it a little bit previously, but I think compared to the previous owner, that any concerns about the road's wear and tear is probably unfounded.
Okay. All right. If that's all. Oh, okay, hold on a second. Is there any questions from any board members? Mr. Longmore?
No questions. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Page.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's call Kathy just to confirm.
This is Kathy Garcia. We have no other public comments holding.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you.
No lucky 13. Okay. That's good. That's good. All right, having heard that there are no more, we'll go ahead and close public testimony at this time. I've heard a lot about holding tanks. But let's keep going. I'll test one later.
Okay.
Is there any rebuttal from you, Mr. Lawmore? Anything, any statements you'd like to make after that?
No, I mean, real briefly, just I can summarize so I can turn it so the board can start its deliberations if it pleases the commission. I'll be very brief tonight. Is that appropriate to do now?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I guess the one comment I'll make, and I apologize, I think my mic is losing its battery. Can the board still hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. I guess the one comment I'll make is, and I feel like I have to, I didn't make any interpretation up about this use. All I did was read the ordinance, and the ordinance says what it says about this use. This is a very straightforward application in my mind. And I think the best evidence of the statement I just made is read the written staff report that the staff put together that deal with our ordinance every day. That's what they do, and there is no indication in here that this does not meet the standards of a farm brewery as it's written into our ordinance. There is a state legislation that says what a brewery license is. My clients know they'll need to meet the conditions for that. And our zoning ordinance is, I know this planning commission knows if the county commissioners want to put a lot of restrictions on a particular use in a particular zone, they have a lot of right to do so within their ordinance. They can make it a conditional use. They could make it a limited use. They made this a permitted use in the Rural Preservation District with no limitations on acreage and no requirement that it meet some definition of farm that it was not put into the ordinance at this point. So everybody has a different opinion, it sounds like, about what a farm is. And there are different definitions for different purposes, but there is no acreage requirement or anything of the type with this. So it's nothing that was made up. If I had been here last time, I would have said the same thing because I would have read the ordinance before the hearing. As to the 6 standards that are there, the staff reports summarizes them well. This is a permitted use. It may be adequately served by public facilities and also promotes the health, safety, welfare of the general public. I draw the commission's attention to the TEC comments that are all in favor or support or say that this is an approvable application. So we think that all of that supports it. There are no recreation or community amenities that need to be provided with this type of use. And the design objectives, I mean, you can see the structure that's already existing on the building. They're not changing it at all. I know there was frustration by the family whose property this was before. We can certainly appreciate that and understand that there's a lot of heartfelt feelings about this. But what we'd ask the Planning Commission to consider is that this is a small business trying to do something in a building that's located on their property that is a permitted use. There's going to be very little, if any, increase in traffic other than maybe a truck 3 times a year. Honestly, I don't see how this is not approvable as a concept site plan because it's a permitted use in the zone. There are no requirements that cannot be met. And I really sincerely do not see how this is going to have any adverse effect on any of the neighbors that spoke. It seemed that they were upset that my clients have listened to some concerns and are willing to not do some of the things they were concerned about. It's almost like they thought that was a bad thing. I've been before this commission enough that I know the members that were in front of tonight appreciate it when neighbors listen to their neighbors and make adjustments to their plans. So for all those reasons and for all the reasons we stated on the record, we'd ask that you approve this. And again, my clients in good faith are asking you to impose conditions on them to limit what they can do there. And I know you all know that that is a very rare request from an applicant to ask this commission to limit their use. And they are truly hopeful and sincerely hopeful, and I've talked to them about this, that hopefully that'll mean something to their neighbors, that they are willing to back up what they're saying here tonight by putting a legal restriction on their property to prove that that is in fact their intent. So we'd ask for that reason that you approve the application with those conditions.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Longmore. Okay, we've heard the rebuttal from the applicant. Well, did the Stuckards have anything they wanted to add? Or has Chris said it all?
We just, Chris has said it all, and we want to thank the board for their time tonight and everybody who called in. We have listened to concerns, and we don't take that lightly. So thank you very much for your time, and
thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we've heard rebuttal from the applicant, and we'll open it up to the board now for our, to begin board deliberation. I mean, we heard what the applicant has asked for. I get to start first. Tonight, anyway.
Good.
It is not very often that we hear to put a restriction on them, which shows in good faith on the tasting and events, anything there besides the brewing itself. I do think we all should put a condition to make sure that they adhere and follow the road agreement now that they know where to go and what to do with that. That'll go a long way. But other than that, I think they've shown everything in good faith and tried their own. So anybody else want to have anything to say? I'm gonna start on my left. Ms. Summers?
No, I agree with you.
Ms. Robert?
Well, I had actually written down pretty much what Mr. Longmore had stated, that it meets all the...
Use your microphone. I can feel it from above. Get ready.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I told you.
For my notes, I had written down pretty much what Mr. Longmore had stated about the Rural Preservation District, and there is no minimum requirement for acreage, et cetera. I was originally concerned when it said it was allowed to have events and tasting rooms, et cetera. That really concerned me, so I appreciate the fact that, the applicants are being very considerate and are asking us to put a condition on that. Lastly, the Class A farm brewery license requirements, none of us here, I don't think, we have to wait to see what happens when they do apply.
We do our part.
We do our part. Who are we to say what a farm is or isn't it? Based on what Maryland has put in writing. That's my opinion. I'm not one to say I can define it. I do, however, want to mention that I truly understand where the Wathans are coming from. I live on a farm myself, and if this happened to me, I'd probably be doing exactly what they're doing. Because there's no doubt. But the rules are the rules, the regs are the regs. And I'm sorry to say, I don't know how I can dispute it.
I wouldn't have sold the property. Okay. Mr. Van Kirk?
We've heard a lot of testimony about people scared we're going to set a precedence. And I think that a lot of times, but in this case, under our purview, under the chapter of the comprehensive zoning ordinance, we're not putting a restriction to let them, if it's approved, to let them do more. We're putting a restriction for less. I would venture to say that a lot of people who may be applying for this Class 8 farm brewing permit in the future would not want them restrictions. So I think if we're setting any precedence, it's for a smaller business than the Class 8 permit would allow them to do, which I've read, and it's quite extensive. Under our zoning ordinance, even though it references the Class 8 farm brewing permit, it doesn't come from us. So we're not approving that. We're just, if approved, approving the ability to move forward from a concept plan. And as Ms. Robrick said and Mr. Thompson said, I understand when you've had a large family property and someone comes in that's not family, of course it creates turmoil and heartaches. I don't know the Stuckards. Plenty of people called in who do. From what I've heard, they seem very genuine. Would I have reached out to the neighbors possibly a little earlier? May have been a good idea. Back in July of 2020, some people said that there was some Facebook articles about tasting rooms and different stuff, which I would assume that people may be a little more concerned. But that's not the case now, so it doesn't seem like it would be anywhere near to the extent that it could be being applied for. So that's all I have.
Okay. Mr. Evans?
Again, I've said this before, there's nothing about me that wishes anything but success for the Stuckards. I can't not pay attention to the work that was done with regard to putting together the information for distilleries, breweries, and wineries in the county. An enormous amount of work went into that. The impetus for that, once again, was to create additional ability for farmers to make money on their farms. And I understand that what was intended and where we are now are entirely two different things. So this sort of brings me to the broader farming community. They're not opposed to the Stuckards. And the Wathans have, as you said, Ms. Robrick, they have a legitimate concern. They're neighbors, and they're always going to turn out. The broader concern, I think, for the farming community is the use of the term farm distillery. And we have done, anybody that was upset, we have done a horrendous job with regard to identifying what that actually means for wineries, distilleries, and breweries. We don't have a consistent definition of farm. I will tell you, quite frankly, you can have a vermiculture, a worm farm out in your yard, and are you farming worms? You are. Is it a farm? In my view, no, it's not. And I think the intent, it was never even considered, and I was sitting there. It's never considered that someone would apply on a 3-acre parcel to do a farm brewery. And that makes us, whoever we're sitting there, and moving forward, remiss. I said last week, or week before last, I guess, I was looking at 5 definitions of farm. And those definitions fit the argument of whoever's presenting the argument. It just, and all of them say different things. I will say that the number of restrictions that the Stuckards are going to agree to, I haven't seen someone proffer those number of restrictions on that parcel. I will say one thing. One of the people that called in my view, I do think that liability on the road is a legitimate concern. I don't know how that works out for the Stuckards or the landowners, but I do think it's a legitimate concern. And again, for all the people that called in, I have no doubt that the Stuckards do a wonderful job with their product. You know, and again, I wish them well, however this goes. But at the end of the day, I will say this again, while these cameras are rolling, this becomes the responsibility of everybody that doesn't agree with how this portion of the zoning ordinance is written. And it becomes incumbent on them to come forward and do a much better job in delineating exactly what a farm is, exactly what the acreage is, and what you can or can't do. It is far too vague and ambiguous with the way it's written, and that has to change. And there are probably, well, not probably, there are other areas in the city that are the same way, that need to be addressed. And that's not, I mean, I'm not trying to put anybody on the spot. Everybody that's ever done this is sort of responsible. You know, some stuff gets by. So however this goes for the Stuckards, I mean, I wish them well. For all you folks that called in, I'm sure that they'd have a great product. And so I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Guess it leaves me, right?
Well, and Mr. St. Clair.
And Mr. Sinclair, that's correct. I'm sorry, Joe. Well, I have to say, for the people who are neighbors, I feel their concerns. I recently had to sell my family homestead. It was just the end of a subdivision, an acre property. We owned it for almost 50 years, and the neighbors keep me in touch on what's going on or what's not going on with the property. And it's pretty sad to hear how they're not, the current owners are not maintaining the property the way my family had. But when I sold that property, it was, I sold my rights to that property. And so long as the new owners are abiding by the laws, I don't have much say other than some sentimental feeling that this is where I grew up. This is my family's, homestead. You're not respecting it. And it hurts me. And so I come into this case with that background. With the evidence presented to us, I saw clearly existing garage front. There is a building that was built before the current owners purchased the property. It has 3 garage doors. I can tell you, my friends with their biggest lift kits on a Ford F-150 are not going to have any problems clearing any one of these 3 garages. These were not designed for residential use. It's a residential property, as some people had mentioned. Clearly, the prior owner had other intentions in mind. Agricultural, who knows? Yeah, it's not my position to judge what they were planning on doing, but clearly 3 vehicles that would require such a large garage door would disturb not just the property owner's property, but the neighbor's property, more so than what I hear the applicants are proposing to do with this property. The last caller for the call-in testimony, Mr. Page, kind of alluded to that. From my understanding, what was presented to us, there may be some pump out required from their underground storage tanks for the waste water 2 or 3 times a year. I think that's a lot less traffic on this residential road than would otherwise be with larger farmer equipment, which I believe is the former use of this building. The current owners, I think, have gone over and above their need to present their case and made some sacrifices they didn't have to do. According to the laws on the books, they are allowed to do stuff, including having a tasting room, including having sales on their property. the case, the applicants are not asking for that. They realize the sensitivity of the property, and they're asking us to put those restrictions in place. So I feel that, with those restrictions as conditions of the approval, I'd be very comfortable in voting in the affirmative for this project. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Mr. St. Clair?
Well, I've listened to everybody. I'm definitely very disturbed over setting a precedent in a rural or residential area. So far as that garage, I realize that you're not from this community, but forestry is an agricultural approved activity, and if that gentleman had a big garage door, you can come to my farm, Mr. Joe, and look at the barn doors on mine, but don't prejudge my barn based upon somebody else and judge their activity. I'm saying that we are getting ready to set a precedent. Yes, they're going to agree not to do the following, even though they are allowed to do the following. What will stop the next one from coming in a 3-acre setting and taking away what took place 10 years ago when farmers were up against it, tobacco was being taken out, and we, as planning commissioners back then, probably didn't see the activity that was going to come, or with an attorney, also, Mr. Lawmore, and that's what you do. You do search out where the weaknesses are in a lot of these ordinances. I don't begrudge you for that. I shame the Planning Commission for not straightening out a lot of these ordinances to make it more clear what is an active farm. And I don't begrudge the people that's trying to put in the brewery for trying to get their lifelong dream. I'm concerned about what's going to set a precedent. And I feel that I do respect the agricultural community, especially soil conservation district guidelines. I served as the soil conservation district supervisor, and I take it that when they say that it's considered a residential lot and therefore a farm brewery designation does not apply, I have to give it some credence. Attorneys can battle back and forth whether that's a good statement, whether they should have said it, but that's the ag community. That's your soil conservation district, and I do rely on them. I have a soil erosion program on my farm here, okay? I had restrictions put on my farm for uses that were set as well. I do respect that. But I think we are setting a bad precedent, and that we should go back and take a look at our comprehensive plan, because there is nothing in there. I mean, to have no limit on the size, does that mean you can go down to a half acre and put a brewery on it? I think it needs to be clarified, and I think that's the responsibility of the planning committee to do that. And I don't think tonight is the time to also decide that. Therefore, I can't go along with the definition of what is being set as a farm brewery. I just think it sets a bad precedent, and that's all I have to say about it.
Okay. Anybody else?
I have just one point. Joe's
Did you get that, Mr. Thompson?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. St. Clair.
Joe's comment with regard to precedent, be a little more clear. I think it's more about proliferation. It's more about being able to, the way it's written, to be able to do this on any size parcel of land. And that is fair. They fear that because it's, again, the way it's written and what the intent was is entirely two different things. And this has been brought to light by this application. And so I would say that it's the proliferation part, as opposed to a precedence part, is probably a greater concern, at least short term. So.
Okay, anybody else? All right, we've heard all our deliberations. We've heard all our different opinions. Is anybody ready to come forward with a motion? It's 10 o'clock. We can sit here till 11. Doesn't matter.
I'm used to Mrs. Robrick doing the.
I don't have
I make a motion that we approve. I don't have the language in front of me. Do you have the case number? Just to say that's all legit. I apologize.
You'll just have to add
Yes.
conditions, right?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. In the matter of concept site plan 20-132-00011, Brenton Bay Brewing, having accepted the staff report and having made a finding that the objectives in section 60.6 of the comprehensive zoning ordinance have been met, and known that the referenced project has met all requirements for concept approval, I move that concept site plan be approved with the following conditions. A, any road improvements required by the state or county must be concurrent with the issuance of the use and occupancy certificate. B, a Class 8 farm brewery license must be obtained before the issuance of the use and occupancy
And C.
certificate. And C, once the Class 8 farm brewery license is obtained, the applicant agrees to limit actions to the brewery only.
To brewing only. Friendly amendment to brewing only.
Thank you for that correction.
Second.
I have a motion, I have a second. Is there any discussion on that? Okay, I wrote down names earlier. We're still going to do it roll call because we're still, as long as we're on TV, in Cyberland, we'll do it that way. Mr. Fazekas?
Yay.
Mr. Evans?
No.
Mr. St. Clair?
No.
Okay. Patricia Roebuck?
Yeah.
Joe Van Kirk?
Aye.
Ms. Summers?
Aye.
And I also vote aye. Okay. Mr. and Mrs. Stuckert, you've heard a long night. You've heard from your neighbors. You've heard from your board members. You've heard from friends. You've heard from a couple of enemies. Please do what's right. As I always say, take care of your neighbors. It's going to take a while. Take care of that road. Take care of your business. And good luck to you in your endeavors.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We will. And thank you to the rest of the board.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, the rest of the board.
Thank you too, Mr. Longmore. Okay, is there any other business tonight?
Yeah, thank you.
Hey, Ms. Jenkins, you're still here. I haven't seen you all night long, and you just popped up on the
I
screen.
have a quick item for new business.
Go ahead.
Are we going to be able to get back to in-person?
Have you heard anything about that, Mr. Hunt? Want to make any statements? Are we going to be back in person, I'll say? Or have you been
Apparently
notified?
there's no
Have you been notified?
distancing guidelines, so.
Yeah.
The option remains. People will be able to come in via video conference or whatever terminology you want to use, but the room will be open. All the planning commission members can come, or they can call in, Zoom in, and same with the public.
Okay. All right.
Motion to adjourn?
I have a
Make a
motion.
motion that we adjourn.
Oh, no, he beat you to it.
I second, that's okay, I second.
Seconded it if you
I
want.
second.
There you go. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you. Thank you very much.